This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
I didn't hear too many bullish cases for China in 2025.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump took steps on everything from TikTok to the southern border.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Still on speaking terms after we looked at our brackets.
Oh, boy.
Market up. We'll get to the brackets in a moment, but markets lift today, Paul.
Looks like the market wants to move higher here, Tom. You got the S&P up at 1.1%. The NASDAQ up 1.3%. Yields moving higher here. The 10-year Treasury,
yeah, like bull market confirmed.
Yeah, exactly right. There you go.
Some of the correlations there. And first thing I looked at, I can't believe I'm saying this, Paul, I'll admit it, is Bitcoin. I mean,
Sure.
88,000 on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I know.
Rounded up.
Yeah, up 3% here today. So it's a risk-on feel across the board there, Tom.
The last week of March, well, okay, Monday's March 31, a week from now, but it's the last week of March. End of the earnings season, of course, lots to talk about. Lizanne Saunders with us, Robert Teeter with us in a moment here on the equity markets, some other worthies this morning as well. Damian Sassower has been way too long. Stephen Trent on the Airlines. And Joe Lavorgna, Paul mentioned Joe Lavorgna as we were talking to Nathan as well. This morning, Bloomberg Surveillance, we're brought to you by BAM Mutual. They insure municipal bonds that finance essential infrastructure and provide guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Learn more about municipal bond credit quality. Visit bambonds.com. On Monday, we spell BAMBONDS, bambonds.com. From the Interactive Broker Studio, still standing after that bracket, Lisa Mateo.
Oh, it is looking so bad right now. Futures, they're looking great. Futures advancing on tariff optimism. The U.S. set to limit the range of import levies it introduces next week. That's the reason for that. We have NASDAQ futures up more than 1%. Same for S&P futures. Dow futures up about 0.8%. We have the 2-year yield at 3.98%. That's up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 4 basis points. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.1%. We go to shares of Tesla. They're building on Friday's gains after Elon Musk urged employees not to sell shares in the company. Their shares up more than 3.5%, leading the Mag 7 right now. Building materials company James Hardie taking a hit, down 14% in Sydney. This is after it agreed to buy Chicago-based AZEK in an $8.75 billion cash and stock deal. AZEK is up about 18%. And Bayer ordered by a U.S. jury to pay about $2.1 billion to a plaintiff who claimed its Roundup weed killer caused cancer. The company will appeal. Shares are down about 6% in Germany. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. We want to do our Cray computer. The way we keep organized here in surveillance, we don't have anything modern.
No.
We got something from Cray years ago. It's a Cray J90. It's a server. Takes up the size of an entire room. And we went in and we said, which guest doesn't have a bracket?
You're right.
Joining us now, Robert Teeter.
So he's focused.
So he's focused and not feeling mediocre like the rest of us here. Chief Investment Strategist, Silvercrest Asset Management. It's tough to predict brackets in the silliness of basketball. How tough is it now to pick an up market?
Incredibly difficult. You know, one of the reasons I don't have a bracket, markets are humbling enough, and this year's been a very difficult year. And one of the reasons is we're in very much of a macro-driven environment paired with high valuation, and that's created a lot of volatility. You know, the buzzwords we've been using with clients have been choppiness and patience all through this year. Today's an interesting indication, though, of why you shouldn't get too bearish in this environment, and that is a slight change in the nuance around what might or might not be happening on April 2nd, and all of a sudden we're off to the races again, just like you were talking about, risk on.
NASDAQ up 1.3% now in futures.
Hey, Robert, we kind of came into this year knowing that this would have to be a year where earnings would have to push this market higher because we weren't going to get a whole lot from the Fed, maybe 1 or 2 rate cuts here. And with all this policy uncertainty, we've seen people bring their GDP forecast down. Does that call into question that earnings underpinning for this market?
It's starting to get a little more dangerous and treacherous on that front. So, you know, the Fed numbers came down a bit in terms of GDP, down 1.7%. So we've done a lot of work. We think 1.5 and below is where you start to get into trouble for earnings. We're not there yet. I think the Fed's number might be a little bit lower. Some of the real-time numbers are above 2. So we still think the earnings backdrop is okay. We're looking for around 9% earnings. This quarter might be one of those quarters that there are a lot of things to blame on any softness, whether it was California or weather or policy uncertainty or slowness with people getting going with CapEx or M&A because of policy uncertainty. So this quarter might be a little bit of a difficult read. So we're really looking to the signals from banks and consumer companies of what they're seeing from the consumer.
So what can the Fed do? We had the Fed last week, kind of just status quo here, but we feel like they're there on the sidelines, ready to step in. But in reality, what can they do in this type of environment?
There's not a lot they can do. I think they're threading the needle very well, which is to keep the focus on both sides of that dual mandate. Not forget that we're above 2% on the inflation front, but at the same time acknowledge that we're downshifting in the economy. So economic growth isn't accelerating; it's decelerating. It's not in a bad spot. But so I think that's why you see some of the kind of nuance in language from Powell in terms of, again, balancing out both sides of that mandate. Not a lot they could do to stimulate growth here. I think the macro environment really has to cool down to get that CapEx and M&A cycle going.
If it's not stagflation, and there's been some adult economists out really making clear they don't see this as stagflation, but whatever it is, it's reduced growth, as Paul says. It's sticky, elevated inflation in some form. And nominal GDP to me is so level. Is there a difference to the stock market if nominal GDP's level from growth dynamics or inflation dynamics? They're two different worlds, aren't they?
Absolutely. Growth dynamics clearly a lot better. One of the things we've been looking for and hoping for and starting to see a bit of is productivity pickup. You've had an environment where likely the job force gains will slow. But if you get productivity picking up, you can still support higher real GDP growth. And that's really what we're looking for, is that real side to keep chugging along at a decent enough number to keep earnings growing.
Where will that chug along come from?
Partly from the productivity side, and partly from the fact that consumer and payrolls have continued to expand. So our simple model there is to look at hires rate, which is above 3%, about 3.6 or so, wages around 4%. Deflate it for inflation, and you've got good spending power from the consumer, which is 2/3 of GDP.
The University of Michigan data came out a week or so ago, which it kind of jumped out at me a little bit because it really suggested that the consumer is getting concerned about the forward economic outlook. They're taking their inflation expectations higher. How concerning was that report to you, or was it just one data point?
It was one data point, but I do think it's a realistic adjustment downward of expectations. One of my fears in this year was that we came into the year with sentiment so high, valuations so high, everyone expecting things to accelerate and be easy. And in fact, we've had a very difficult environment. And in my view on the economy, we're sort of downshifting to normal rather than heading to recession. But to any normal person, that feels like a slowdown, and a slowdown will then translate to weaker sentiment. So I think we have to be careful in how we interpret it. But I think it was a realistic take that economy is cooling a bit.
I'll only do this. I haven't done the drawdown. You can do this on the Bloomberg Professional Service easily, folks. But Paul, I got a drawdown. It's a crushing 7.8%.
Oh, that's
on SPX.
Exactly.
It's a bear market.
That's peak to trough. Yeah, exactly.
Robert Teeter, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated today to give us a first look at the equity markets here. He's Chief Investment Strategist, Silvercrest Asset Management. Futures up 62 right now. Dow futures up 368. Critically, the VIX at 19 comes in 18.97. And as Paul mentioned earlier, it's a correlated lift here with yields higher is what we see this morning. 2-year yield almost back to 4%, 3.98%. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to do like adult BI work, and then we'll talk brackets here in a moment, because he does help Scarlet Flu with the plague of filling out his brackets. And Scarlet, we all know, is like number one in the game and massively helping. Damian Sassar with us on EM. What do you see in EM around the political maelstrom of the world?
Oh, Turkey, I think you're talking about, right?
Well, it could be Turkey, but that's idiosyncratic, right?
Yeah. No, I think investors remain frozen ahead of the deadline, and we're seeing more evidence of that today. I mean, dollar bears are forced to take a breather here. You see U.S. real yields have stabilized, Tom. I know you love the 10-year real yield. You see this anticipation of quarterly and monthly rebalancing. Maybe you're going to see European equities get a bigger bid here. But all of that notwithstanding, it seems that EM Asia is still, in the face of stronger currencies, willing to stimulate their economies that much more. That's reducing the carry. The mark-to-market losses are going to be there, and kind of EM Asia and some of these low yielders.
Right.
And that's fueling the bid for Brazil and Mexico. And so they are the best performers in global fixed income. You're getting the juice from the FX as well as their higher yields. I think the Selic rate in Brazil is 14.25%. That's the overnight rate. So, if you're a carry trader and you're looking to clip some coupon and get some incremental yield, EM's where you want to be.
Okay, EM's where you want to be. From a bigger standpoint, if the world walks away from America, where do they walk to?
Well, Japan and Switzerland. Because look, let's be clear. The dollar smile is not broken, but I see it extending at least to other countries like Japan and Switzerland. Let me tell you what I mean. You've got the right side when growth outperforms in the U.S. and so the currency appreciates, and then you've got the risk-off bid, and you have the same thing in Japan and Switzerland, but even more so today because their economies are coming from a very different place. So they have some of these sort of risk-off characteristics you would find in the dollar, but they have this sort of asymmetry to growth on the upside. The only problem there, guys, is it's a negative mark-to-market from the perspective of a U.S. dollar investor because those are low-yielding economies. So it takes a little more juice to basically have the you-know-whats to invest in those countries. But if you believe, that you want to benefit from this sort of tariff risk and all the dollar smile stuff, then those are two currencies that a lot of investors are taking a look at there.
All I know about currencies is my one question, which is there a bear case for the U.S. dollar? And I haven't seen it forever. A 4% pullback here since early January. Is that the beginning of a bear market for the U.S. dollar?
I've made a living not being a dollar bear, Paul. Right. You know this. So I agree with you. And look, if you look at U.S. yields, look no further, right? 4.5% policy rate here in the U.S., and it's not expected to come off that much. If there's one thing we got from the March SEP out of the Fed, it's that real policy rates in the U.S. are going to stay higher for longer, right? So, for me, I can't really bet against the dollar, but, certainly, investors are doing that right now. And you see, the uptick in China fixing, and you see the stress in Turkish government markets kind of fueling that bid for the dollar here. And it's, again, forcing dollar bears to take a breather here in the early going.
Well, that Turkish lira, just to steal from Tom Keene here, what a chart that is. and this isn't some... How is Turkey viewed before the recent uncertainty? How has Turkey been viewed by your investors?
And yet, Paul, investors have really taken the plunge into Turkey amidst all that you see on that chart. And I agree with you. The stones you have to invest in a place like Turkey after all we've seen. It's a CFA level 3 word there, Tom.
Can we say that, Lisa, on air?
Orthodoxy is something that the Central Bank of Turkey has recently found, and they've been allowed to stimulate and start cutting rates again, which has been great for the market, great for their equity markets. And so you've seen a lot of offshore investors come in there and take the plunge, and now they're getting whipped around again, just like in the old days. And it's like, I told you so, So it's really tough for investors to move into some of those markets. Right. And Brazil's another one, right? But again, you're seeing a willingness on the part of dollar investors to put their money to work offshore, unlike I've seen in recent years.
Does Trump get the weak dollar he's always spoken of? Does a president get a weak dollar?
The president seems to be getting everything he wants these days, so I'm not going to be against that either. But I don't know if it's so explicit that he wants a weaker dollar over the long term, Tom. Structurally speaking, a weaker dollar is not really in. You can argue it's in his best interest with the tax policy and fiscal policies that he has planned, but I don't necessarily know if that's really what he wants. I know, you listen to tariffs and exports. I don't think Trump knows what he wants, and I don't think Scott Bessent knows what Trump wants, to be honest with you. He wants what he wants the minute he wants it, and, right now I think you're right. The dollar, he's opened up the runway for the dollar to weaken.
Okay. We got to go to the brackets here. Bloomberg
Maryland.
Business and Sports with
Tariffs.
Damien Sassower. How much fun was it to see your Vanderbilt participate?
Oh, you don't want me to go there. So I actually opened up my FanDuel account this weekend. I don't bet normally on games, but when Vandy went up, I knew that was a problem because they're really just not that good. So I actually made a little money on them losing, Tom. So yeah, I wasn't a Vandy fan, but what I'll tell you I could not believe was to watch the Maryland Terps basically pull that buzzer beater out. I got to tell you, what's his face? It's not even Cooper Flagg. Who's the kid on Duke who was 9 for 10 with 7 3-pointers? This is
no, Proctor.
Proctor. These guys are. Duke is unstoppable. Yeah. Florida, looked like they were going to get unseated there for a minute with UConn. But where are we here? We're looking at. It looks like it's Duke's. Duke's, Paul Sweeney.
Well, where we are is just it's all the top seeds are in there. The biggest outliers, number 10 Arkansas, but it's Calipari. So how can that be an outlier?
It's exactly.
No Cinderella stories this year.
Exactly. Can I ask a dumb question?
Surely.
The NBA. Curry made that shot from Rhode Island or wherever. that was a video this weekend. They make three-pointers in the NBA effortlessly.
Yeah.
They don't in NCAA. Why aren't the coaches working the ball in closer
I
to
think
make for two?
during the tournament, I think they let the defenses play a little bit closer, meaning like, it's
a rougher
hard.
game.
It's a rougher game. It's hard. And in the NBA, it's a ticky-tack game also. I mean, I think compared to what I'm looking at in college anyway. So, I mean, look at the end of that Maryland game. I mean, like, that could have easily been a travel or a foul there, but, they let him shoot it. The buzzer beater went in, and the Terps are in the Sweet 16 for the first time since 2016. And that's a good thing, I think. But, look, I think the NBA, the Lakers, man. I mean, wow. You've got Golden State now, the Lakers now. I mean, this is good for the NBA. If you can get the Lakers playing the way they're capable of, you're going to get a lot of Luka Doncic and LeBron James. It's going to be
At BRKT Go, your Final Four is actually pretty good.
My Final Four's there. Yeah. No, I'm still
there.
alive. But
Like me.
But
Lisa will walk out of the studio if we mention a break.
Rich Truman, I hear, is doing very well.
He's huge.
Voice of
He's
God.
solid.
I don't know what
It's
he
like
does.
his football picks.
Exactly.
Damien Sassar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you come back later in the week as we get to
I'd love
Thursday?
that. If I get any sleep, I have a
Duke
new
plays
puppy
on
at home.
Thursday.
I gotta watch out.
You're
there.
in today.
I am in today. I didn't get much sleep over the week. I
Well,
said I got
it's a
my
long
second.
way from the Regency Hotel on Park Avenue. Some of our contestants stay there.
Some of your contestants. I'm more of a Four Seasons guy.
Okay, well, that's true.
I'm older.
Futures up 66. With that news in New York City, he stays at the Four Seasons. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. More courtroom action today in the legal battle over deporting hundreds of migrants from Venezuela. President Trump escalates his feud with federal judge James Boasberg, calling Boasberg a constitutional disaster on social media. Boasberg has set a hearing for today to, quote, get to the bottom of whether the administration ignored his order to turn around flights bound for El Salvador carrying Venezuelan immigrants. Israel killed 2 members of Hamas's de facto cabinet in the Gaza Strip on Sunday. It brings to 11 the death toll within the 20-person forum during a renewed Israeli offensive aimed at destroying the Palestinian faction as a military and governing force. According to the Israel Defense Forces, they were hit in South Gaza by airstrikes, which resumed last week after a truce expired. Bloomberg's Dan Williams has more from Jerusalem.
What's happening in Gaza is the Israelis appear to be focusing, among other things, on the civilian government of Hamas. Keep in mind that Israel's objective is to destroy Hamas completely and to prevent it using a ceasefire or a lull in fighting to rebuild its capabilities.
Bloomberg's Dan Williams in Jerusalem. Canada's new prime minister is calling for a snap election April 28th. At a news conference, Mark Carney says he needs a strong mandate from the nation as he deals with President Trump's trade war and his threats to Canadian sovereignty.
President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen.
Parliament is being dissolved. This year was always going to be an election year, but it would usually have occurred in October. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. More with Tom, Paul, and Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Michael Barr's news update. It's brought to you by IBKR. Will the U.S. CPI, will it exceed 2.4% this March 2025? Trade your prediction with IBKR Forecast Trader. The yes was recently, it's 60%, 60%. Buy yes or buy no and earn $1 if you're right. Go to ibkr.com/forecast. What I noticed, Paul Sweeney, within all the hysteria about March Madness, how little of it was on YouTube. They've clearly made a decision.
Sure.
It's not like, soccer, English soccer, or others, even the NFL, where they're like, here it is, the highlights go.
No, it's
really
with all the CBS properties, and then with the Warner Brothers properties. So think about TNT, TBS, and True TV. Those are the ones.
TV.
Those were the ones airing all the games to this point, and now it kind of tightens up into the CBS properties and then TNT.
And do you get a feeling it's got the huge deal going that it's always had?
Yes, I do. But what's lacking here this year, just looking at the Sweet 16, is you don't have that Cinderella story. You don't have that Cinderella story. And so that's a problem because that's always been part of the charm and the draw for March Madness has been who's going to be the Sweet 16 story that everybody's going to root for. That maybe they're not a basketball fan, but they're a fan of just kind of this, small-time school playing big time games.
On I-80, a sinkhole. Speaking of sinkholes, let's look at Michael Barr's bracket. How'd that work out, Michael Barr?
The only thing I can say is I pretty much had a chalk bracket, but it was the other games that I just blew apart and messed up. But I still think I have the number ones in there.
Okay, and now we have a moment of silence. Paul, I watched 6 Minutes. I watched St. John's. Yeah. Was it like deer in the headlights? I mean,
they just had a bad night.
I thought Mr. Pitino
have a terrible shooting night. They were 2 for 22 from threes or something like that, so they just couldn't shoot the basketball, and boom, there you go. Simple as that. Just had a bad time to have a bad game.
But character building in your rebuild, right?
Well, they rebuild with a whole new team. I mean, we won't,
we'll see.
All new players.
From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We'll look at a nice lift to the markets. This is the next round of U.S. tariffs due April 2nd, set to be a little bit more targeted than expected. We have NASDAQ futures up nearly 1.5%, S&P futures up more than 1%. We have Dow futures up 0.8%. The 2-year yield, 3.99%, up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 4 basis points. We have more economic data out this week with core PCE in the spotlight on Friday. Today, though, it's the S&P Global preliminary March composite index for services and manufacturers. Now, in other economic news, the Bipartisan Policy Center, it says the U.S. could breach the debt ceiling sometime between mid-July and October if Congress does not act. A few companies making news this morning. Jack Ma-based Ant Group. It's built AI models that cost 20% less than using Chinese-made chips, with the results similar to those from NVIDIA. Then we'll stick with AI. Sources say Korean chip startup Furiosa AI, it rejected an $800 million takeover offer from Meta. And finally, Apple adding cameras and visual intelligence features to your smartwatch. Here's how it works. If you hold down the camera button, you can take a picture of something and then have it analyzed by ChatGPT or Google search. That easy. It's coming soon. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
And now on a Monday, an Audible. Does anybody know how to use an iWatch?
Yeah,
in our house, but do you use it like you do all the? At our house, there's a huge frustration. Vet bill, afterthought, Mrs. Keene. Nobody uses the iWatch because it's too damn complicated to figure out how much you walked.
Well, I do use it for the fitness. That's all I use it for, to be honest. But I think it's too tiny. Like, I have to grab my glasses in order to see my Apple Watch, which is kind of annoying. But I don't know.
Does it tell time? That's my question.
That is the main thing.
Are you using your iWatches?
I don't have an
Sweeney
iWatch,
house?
please.
You don't have one?
Oh, no.
You're the only one east of the Mississippi who doesn't have an iWatch.
No, that's because I take my watches seriously. So I'm not going to play around with that stuff. I've got my phone. That's enough.
That's true.
You got to track the miles. The miles.
I got the miles on the phone.
I'm on YouTube Live chat. Please.
They're steps. They're not miles for me. They're steps.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
We got some time here. I want to do this. Lucas Shaw Publishing this weekend. Just spectacular screensaver? Screen time. And it was on Korea in their collapse of their entertainment business. And one guy just quietly said, YouTube has changed everything.
Sure, yeah.
And we're knee deep in this, folks.
Yep.
I mean, Lisa, Paul, and I, and Michael Barr, we're living this every single day. Where are we, Paul Sweeney, in 5 years with YouTube? I don't think anybody knows, including Google.
No, it's still a growth story. And I think one of the questions I hear people ask is, where is linear TV going to be? Where's it going to bottom out? Is there a bottom? Is it zero? Is it like 50% of the people will have paid TV? I don't know, but it's the growth of streaming continues.
Joining us now, a creator on YouTube, Kriti Gupta, joins us from London this morning. Kriti, I can't figure out the zeitgeist in the United Kingdom. Obviously buffeted by Mr. Trump, and the King had support for Mr. Carney in that. But the Chancellor of the Exchequer could be thrown into the North Sea at any moment. The fiscal budget's a disaster. But am I right? The economy is actually pretty good?
It's relatively good. I would say it's better than its peers, which I've got to say the bar is low in Europe. We got a series of economic data out of France and Germany this morning, and the market celebrated that it wasn't as bad as expected, but still pretty bad. Economies that are still very much contracting, but the UK is standing out as kind of this island of stability, to your point. That could all change in Wednesday. To your point, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, basically the UK equivalent of Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, is going to be making this what they're calling a spring statement, declaring how they're going to be fixing this kind of massive gap in their finances. At their core is whether or not they're taxing U.S. tech. It's a really controversial issue here.
Was that string of profanity Saturday night, Kriti Gupta at Heathrow? I mean, what was your observation on this shocking shutdown of LHR?
I mean, just surprising in that not only did it have massive implications for the UK, but it had massive implications for all of Europe. I think it's the second most traveled international airport after Dubai in the world. So this was a really big deal, all because of an electrical outage that wasn't even really part of the Heathrow infrastructure. So there's been a lot of fallout in terms of flight delays, a lot of anger from a lot of people. I really enjoyed it. I was stranded in Oslo. I had a great time. It gave me an extra day in the Scandinavian countries, which was fabulous. So I actually really enjoyed it, but I think I'm in the minority there.
Lisa, do you see how the three of us, we have no life? And Gupta's like, oh, I think I'll go to Oslo this weekend. Pray tell, Kriti, where are we going next weekend?
Can you believe it or not, Tom? I've got the next 4 weeks in London. What am I going to do? No travel for 4 weeks and then potentially coming back home. I know, it's a real curse.
Kriti, how's the thinking over in Europe these days in the UK regarding the U.S., Russia, Ukraine. Is there a feeling that something positive could come from here, or the deal might not be that great for Europe?
I think there is a real fear, a real element of dread when it comes to these ceasefire arrangements. Remember, Europe is still not at the table. They're happening in Riyadh, not even on the European continent. And there is really no voice in Europe when it comes to these ceasefire talks, which I think is interesting because the closest you get to a European voice is actually in Turkey. The idea that President Erdogan may actually have some sort of diplomatic ability or some sort of pipeline between Vladimir Putin, between Vladimir Zelensky, and between the United States, given that it is dealing with its own domestic issues, but it's also, of course, one of the key trading partners with Russia. It's a NATO member. It's also on the border of the Black Sea. So a lot of the grain deals that come out, the grain exports from Ukraine, from Russia that ultimately feed back into American cereals, for example, a lot of that is monitored and ushered and guided by what happens in Turkey. So it's interesting that that is kind of the European voice potentially at the table, or as close as you get to one.
How about just the whole concept of defense in Europe? So much has changed with the announcement from Germany several weeks ago that they're going to step up their investments. Of course, we've got the rhetoric coming from the Trump administration about pulling back potentially some of those commitments to NATO. What's collectively the discussion these days over in the UK and Europe regarding defense?
Well, Paul, I would say the momentum, the excitement around defense, and I know it's kind of a scary word to say in Europe in terms of things like words like rearmament, but that is seeing the same momentum, the same excitement, the same push from public and private that AI is seeing in the United States. And I think this is a really big deal because when you look at the markets and you look at the investment, it is identical, the kind of moves and the excitement you're seeing in Wall Street and Silicon Valley to the sentiment emanating from Paris, Berlin, Brussels, around, again, what is very significantly and culturally a pretty hot topic when it comes to Europe for, of course, the history.
We're doing an airline bit coming up. Stephen Trent with Citigroup with us here in a bit. Kriti Gupta, as we go into the summer season, is there talk of a tourist slowdown in London, translated talk of an American slowdown or not?
Not necessarily in London, but you're seeing it in other parts of Europe. So Spain, Italy, even in Norway, they're talking about it. Right now, you're in the slow season. It's still kind of chilly. The sun hasn't fully come out yet. So no, there aren't any tourists yet, but there is a concern that in 3 months' time, that consumerism that we've seen from the United States is going to slow down. And what has been boosting so much of many of these economies, again, Spain, Italy, Greece, Norway, the Scandinavians, isn't actually going to see the same boost. And that's actually, ironically, kind of a good thing for the likes of France and Germany, who've been looking at their southern neighbors and saying they're doing way too well for an economy that's significantly smaller and it's all tourism based. So the irony of this is that maybe the core European countries may actually have a moment in the sun given their fiscal spend, but also the lack of American tourists that may be showing up on the beaches of Europe.
Kriti Gupta, thanks so much. Greatly appreciated this morning from Oslo via London via I wish I had her life. Thank you, Kriti, for that. I just noticed this. Oslo, like in January when it's worstest, they have like 6 hours, 35 minutes-ish of sun, of daylight.
Yep.
And already as the season migrates forward, I got this very fancy chart out here on timeanddate.com, but they're already out to 12 hours.
Oh, nice.
They're like getting normal.
Yeah.
And in the summer, they have almost 19 hours of sunlight.
That is great.
Great
chart.
chart.
That's off. Yeah, boy, that's a tough, interesting way to live over there. I'm heading over to Italy in the fall.
You're going. This is really cool.
I'll be spending some euros there.
The celebration of the Pope leaving the hospital today, the Jubilee.
Sure.
And hopefully a recovering Pope Francis. I mean, and it's booming.
Yeah.
What do you want to see in Rome? I mean, what's like the number one?
Yeah, I've never been to Rome, so anything they show me.
Oh, you've never been?
Never been to Rome.
Oh my word!
No, I've been to Milan for business like a gajillion times. Never gone anywhere else.
There's two artichokes. There's the Jewish artichoke and the beautiful Jewish sector, and there's the Roman artichoke, which I've literally had like 3 orders in a row. So the artichokes is like, you have to do that, and I mean, it's Rome, and it'll be beautiful. What's beautiful today is the data check. It's the first correlated normal data check in ages. Dollar fractionally weaker. Paul notes a yield out. Paul, we're going to get a 4% 2-year yield.
Yeah, absolutely.
Higher by 4 basis points.
I know. We're inching back up here.
Bitcoin, 87,600 in futures, up 64. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo, and we have this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Trade over 10,000 U.S. stocks and ETFs, U.S. equity index options, U.S. treasuries, and more on your timetable. Learn more at ibkr.com/around the clock. Well, we've got futures advancing this morning. Signs that the next round of President Trump's tariffs may not be as intense as previously expected. We have NASDAQ futures up nearly 1.5%. S&P futures up more than 1%. Dow futures up 0.9%. The two-year yield 3.99%, up 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 5 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold at $3,026 an ounce. We go to oil. Brent crude $72 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.1%. Few companies making news. DNA testing company 23andMe. Well, it's filed for bankruptcy. Its co-founder or CEO stepping down, but will continue to serve on the board. And Novo Nordisk has signed a $2 billion deal with Hong Kong-based United Laboratories International, and that's for a next-generation obesity drug. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. I greatly appreciate it. Lots to talk about this morning. Busy morning. Futures up 67. Nice lift to the market. And some of that's because of our political news flow here in America. Henrietta Treyz joins. She's at Veda Partners. We've really enjoyed her valuable briefs once, twice a week here. Henrietta, I guess we're up because we're going to get tariff light. Is it as simple as that?
I probably, the interpretation, the headline reads as tariff light. I think if you dig underneath the surface, you'll see that it's still tariff really heavy. We have 20% new tariffs on $500 billion worth of goods coming in from China already. Those are going to rise to higher rates. They go on top of the Section 301 tariffs that are been in place for 7 years. So we're already up in the nearly 50% range. That should tick higher on all goods coming in from China. And you can say that story across the globe as well. With Canada and Mexico, I expect EU auto tariffs around April 2nd, new investigations. So there's a lot to come.
Are Republicans pushing back against, as a general statement, the White House? I see percolations of that. But do you see Congress animals pushing back against the Trump administration?
No, not at all. I was just on the Hill with a whole host of Republicans from all different states, Tennessee, North Carolina, Arkansas, and the response function is basically to diminish the severity of the tariffs and then talk about how they might be short-lived. Because the senators and lawmakers don't have information from the White House, they don't have a sense of what's coming any more than the street does, because so much of this is a moving target and being crafted at the White House without their input, and in many cases directly against what they would like to see. What you see the members doing is really downplaying the import of these tariffs. So there's a widespread view, for example, that it's just the uncertainty around the tariffs, not the tariffs themselves that are the problem. And then it really delineates between states. Do you have a lot of union members in your state? If so, maybe you're kind of supportive of the tariffs. Do you have a lot of manufacturers in your state? Then maybe you're supportive of the tariffs. So it really ranges, but I don't see any material pushback from Republicans at all. No.
Well, how about the Democrats? I'm not even sure we know who the voice of the Democratic Party is here.
Henrietta Treyz.
Yeah, I don't know. Chuck Schumer, I don't know. Much less seeing a coherent countermeasures from the Democrats. Where is this party?
Democrats are absolutely nowhere. So it's also in with Democratic leadership over the last week. And what's exactly the problem is the same things on the Republican side. Because President Trump's agenda is more populist, there are some Democrats who support the tariffs. Bernie Sanders, for example, is going to support some of these tariffs. And senators or congressmen from the heavy union states and the Rust Belt are going to be supportive of the tariffs. So the Democratic Party can't find a message around how to demonstrate that 25% tariffs on aluminum directly translates to every bottle of beer that you're buying. They cannot also get their caucus united and in line to say, hey, we don't like these taxes on Americans that are coming. We don't support using current policy baseline to blow out the deficit. They're nowhere.
Henrietta, this came up this weekend over a beverage of my choice. I'm going to try to keep politics out of it. Henrietta Treyz, is there any indication whatsoever that the liberals of the Democratic Party want to move to the center?
I don't think that's something that anybody should bake in from the far left. I mean, Bernie Sanders has been Bernie Sanders for 40 years, so I don't see that change. I do see the far left getting louder. And there's some fracture there as well. When you think about a senator like Fetterman out of Pennsylvania differing with maybe some of the more quintessential far left folks that you would think of with AOC or Bernie Sanders, there's just a lot of divide, I would say, in the Democratic Party.
And is there not a belief within the Democratic Party leadership that the left wing of the party is weakening perhaps the overall Democratic Party? And if to any extent they want to be competitive in 2 years, that they need to move more to the center? Is there not a belief there?
Yeah, no, absolutely there is. I mean, but man, how long have we been having that fight? When Democrats were, upset at Bernie Sanders for running against Hillary Clinton, it was the exact same conversation. And that was way back in the day. So it's not that Democrats don't have the same fights that they've always had. They're just still warring factions. And I think what the problem might be from the establishment front with the Chuck Schumer wing of the party is that they're seeing the current dissatisfaction with Donald Trump translate out into the ether and the general public. And Democrats in special elections, as I think I pointed out a couple of weeks ago, are up 10 percentage points more than they were just in November. So it's almost like the work of uniting the party or getting the party excited to turn out is happening in spite of or because of or as a secondary function of this conversation. So they're not overly concerned.
Great first brief of the week. Henrietta Treyz, thank you so much from all of us at Team Surveillance. Really, really appreciate it. With Veda Partners in Washington and Narland. You say Narlands.
Yeah. I haven't been there in such a long time. I
loved it.
Great city. I want to get back there.
Loved it. I agree. Road trip.
So unique. Yeah, absolutely.
You picked
absolutely.
When the black flies leave.
Okay.
And also I'm not going near snakes. I'm not going, don't give me this bayou Cajun stuff. Futures up 68 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. U.S. and Russian negotiators are meeting today in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, on issues related to stopping the fighting in Ukraine. The goal is a partial limited ceasefire scaled back from initial U.S. hopes for a full immediate 30-day ceasefire. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is part of the U.S. delegation. Ukrainian parliament member Oleksandro Moresko told the BBC he's worried Witkoff seems to support Moscow's territorial goals. He criticized Witkoff for saying that these regions are Russian-speaking and the people living in them have approved referendums indicating they want to be under Russian rule.
He's either totally unprofessional and not fit for his position, for his role, which is very important, or he is acting in the interests of Putin.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials say at least 7 people were killed when Russia launched a barrage of drones across Ukraine overnight. Second Lady Usha Vance is set to travel to Greenland this week as President Donald Trump continued to suggest the U.S. could take control of the mineral-rich Arctic island. Usha Vance says she will leave Thursday and return Saturday.
I'm also coming to celebrate the long history of mutual respect and cooperation between our nations, and to express hope that our relationship will only grow stronger in the coming years.
The wife of Vice President J.D. Vance will be part of a U.S. delegation set to visit historical sites and learn about its heritage. Greenland is a self-governing region of Denmark and a NATO ally of the U.S., but President Trump has said repeatedly that he thinks the U.S. should take Greenland for strategic and national security purposes. Canada's new prime minister is calling for a snap election April 28th. Mark Carney says President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country and wants to break us so America can own us, adding we will not let that happen. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And now the fossil report on Bloomberg Surveillance. Michael Barr will help out with this. Remember, like in movies, like an old movie, like a Gene Hackman movie, there's always a phone book. In the Manhattan phone book, remember the white pages? Or the yellow pages. Remember as a kid looking? They went out in like 2015 or whatever. I can't remember. Then there was Dun & Bradstreet, which was like how you judged a firm. And the thing, I mean, Paul, you're intimately involved with this. Basically, they've tanked for the last decade. Is that?
Well, I mean, I've been Dun & Bradstreet's a data information company, arguably in some competitive positions vis-a-vis Bloomberg LP, but it's a data company, provides data on companies. And before you had the internet, it was really important. But So I've covered that company for 30 years, but they've been public, then private, then public,
Exactly.
and now they're going private again today in a deal that values their equity at close to $4 billion, enterprise value of a little over $7 billion. Those are the same numbers I remember using for this company 20 years ago. So there really hasn't been a lot of growth, but data is valuable.
Oh, yeah, Lisa Mateo has an enterprise value of $7 billion. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo.
I'm so depressed. Good morning on YouTube. I don't know how to pronounce it. Lihue, Kauai, Hawaii.
Don't know. That
Early
sounds good.
morning.
Sure.
I don't know if the sun's up yet.
Can't be.
It looks like it looks like a place like where Spielberg would live or someone like that. It's like gorgeous. It's like you can wave to Russia, I think. It's that far. Good morning in Hawaii.
That's Alaska.
Thank you for listening in your early morning on YouTube. We really appreciate that. Watching on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. The newspapers, Lisa Mateo. Lisa, what do you have?
Okay, so next month, the White House hosts the annual Easter egg roll, right? All the kids come out. It's a big 147-year tradition. But the New York Times is saying this year it could be a little bit different because it could be funded by corporate sponsors. So that's the difference. But they're saying, though, it's raising some ethical, legal concerns from President Trump because he's allowing companies to profit from the event. What are we talking about? How much, right, could a corporate company bring in? So they're saying there's three options. It costs between $75,000 and $200,000. That's what they would pay for the little perks.
To what?
Okay, so for example, they get the corporate booth, they get the logo placements, they get the branded snacks, they get to have exclusive tickets to brunch with the First Lady. They get 150 tickets themselves for the event.
Does the Easter Bunny come in a Cybertruck?
I don't know, but it's a different kind of feel to it, I guess it could be if it brings in these corporate sponsors.
Next.
Supposed to be focused on the children.
Let's raise a little cash, I guess.
Raise a little cash. Yes,
All
it
right.
goes to the White House Historical Association. So there you go.
Sure.
All right. Paul, Sunday Duke, right? Pounded Baylor, 89-66. Yep. No doubt they're a good team. But the Washington Post is saying a big reason behind their success is this age-old strategy, their height.
Yeah, the tallest team in the country.
The tallest team in the country. 79.8 inches across 15 players. So it ranges from a 7'2" center to a 5'8" guard. Yep. So in between, they have no other player listed below 6'5". I mean, it's crazy the height that they do have, but it's an advantage.
Okay, dumb question, Paul. You're qualified. Okay, should they raise the hoop?
Nah.
11 feet, 12 feet?
No, if they do anything, and they might push back the three-point line at some point. Yeah, but they'll start in the pros there for that. But so Duke is the tallest team. But they're also, I think, and they're probably ranked third in terms of defense, but they're the best defensive Duke team I've ever seen.
I mean, moment of silence here. You've nailed this.
Yeah, they're just
Why
crazy.
does your bracket show your brilliance?
I have no idea exactly, because I tried to get cute, but I should have just picked all the higher seeds.
You got to be dumb as wood like me and Lisa.
Yes, you got to do the
I got emailed in. It
like
says too much bracket talk. I'm like, we've lost so much money in our 201ks. We're talking bracket. Next.
All right, we go from 201k, we go to Roth IRAs. That's what we're talking about. This is actually the new trend with young savers. Roth IRAs, okay, the Wall Street Journal is saying they're taking the advice of their parents, financial coaches, tax advisors. They're using it to save for retirement, big purchases. They're actually opening it in addition to saving for the workplace retirement plans. So that's something a little bit different. But with TaxSafe not far off, they're actually making all these last-minute contributions to it, too, on top of it. So we're talking about people 40 and under. That's who's starting to use this a little bit more, and they're seeing the advantage.
I think my three oldest kids, they're between 25 and 29. They
do both?
Well, all I'm thinking is, specifically my two older ones, they were little kids. They remember 9/11 because they were preschool 9/11. Yeah. They remember the financial crisis big time, and then they have the pandemic. Their whole life, they've had crazy stuff happen, and I think that's made them a little bit more cautious in terms of saving. That's the conversations I have with my guys. And they're all 401ks and doing all that kind of stuff. And
folks, from Paul Sweeney, there's a single smartest thing I've heard in 90 days. Here, our kids are different. And one of the things is they've seen family members or friends, parents run out of money. Yeah. That's something we didn't really know.
Yeah, it's different.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. I just can't say enough about the value of the newspaper segment as well. Lisa said, my bracket's so bad, you got to play Chris Isaac. Okay, Lisa.
I never dreamed that I'd lose somebody like you. No, I don't want to fall in love. No, I don't wanna fall in love with you.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What's the immediate take of a tariff war?
For the longest time, technology has been the driver of this market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump declared a national emergency at the U.S. border with Mexico.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, thank you for being with us on your commute across the nation. Good morning on an Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Sirius XM. When you roll, Paul, that's the way you listen, right? Sirius XM.
Yeah, we got Sirius XM in the car, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good morning, 99.1 FM, Washington, 92.9, up in Boston, from Mount Katahdin to Black Island. Ooh. Snow up there. I noticed the map out there. The snow, like northern New England coming up here. Still winter in parts of the north towards. Did you see Mark Carney this weekend?
Did not.
He was wearing goalie skates. Have you
Really?
ever skated on goalie skates?
No, thank you.
Harvard goalie. I mean, the real deal.
Oh, is that right?
I skated once on goalie skates, and it was painful. I mean, they're impossible.
I don't know how those guys do it.
I was dazzled how he did that. Anyways, good morning, everyone. A market with a lift. Why are we up, Paul? Up 67, futures 1.2%. Why?
Tariffs maybe not going to be as broad as deep, maybe, but I'm not sure how the market can say that, because I'm not sure what we're going to see until April 2nd. I'm not sure the administration knows what they're going to deliver until April 2nd.
We'll have to see. Bloomberg surveillance this morning. Lizanne Saunders coming up. Brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading derivatives marketplace, offering the widest range of global benchmark products across all major asset classes. CME Group, where risk meets opportunity. Thank you, CME, for your support of what we do. From the Interactive Broker Studios with futures up 66 points, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, nice lift to the markets. Hopes of more targeted U.S. tariffs. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up nearly 1.5%. S&P futures up more than 1%. Dow futures up 0.9%. The two-year yield, 3.99%. That's up 4 basis points. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.29%. And that's up 4 basis points. With the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Tesla leading the Mag 7 stocks before the bell. Its shares up about 4%. Meanwhile, Tesla competitor BYD reported full-year net income topped estimates. Its shares up 3% in Hong Kong. Hyundai expected to announce a $20 billion U.S. investment at the White House today alongside President Trump. That's according to CNBC. Its shares are up 3% in Hong Kong. And from cars to entertainment, Disney's Snow White topped the box office in the U.S. and Canada. $43 million, but less than expected. The remake actually cost at least $250 million to create. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Without question, our equity discussion of Monday, maybe dare I say of the week as well. Lizanne Saunders joins us now with Charles Schwab. Lizanne, card to rule. I got to be in the game even when I'm stressed. Going to cash is a tough track record. How do you stay in the game given the cross currents of March of 2025?
So I think within the equity space, staying factor focused. As you know, Tom, we have been very factor biased and oriented over the last couple of years, feeling like the monolithic sector calls are much more difficult to do. There's much more volatility on a week-to-week basis at the sector level, a little more consistency in terms of performance at the factor level. And one of the factors that we added to our focus list as we headed into this year was low volatility. For obvious reasons, you wanted to have a little bit of that protection with that low volatility factor. And that's been the best performing factor. You guys track it at Bloomberg over the past 3 months or so. So I think the best way to navigate is a little bit more defense, but not in the traditional defensive sectors, doing it via the factor level.
Lizanne, I think one of the concerns out there in the marketplace is people are starting to question this economy. If in fact some of these tariffs come in, it could spell economic growth concerns. It could spell inflation concerns, and that calls into question kind of the overall health of the economy. How material is that risk? Because that would go to the earnings story.
Oh, absolutely. I think right now, if you look at betting odds, if you look at a consensus of economists, you're somewhere in the 30-ish% probability of recession. But that's a completely moving target as a result of the nature of this uncertainty and the way we get tariff announcements, not to mention back and forth, pauses, retaliations. But I think if we go to the extreme on the tariff front, it raises recession risk, not just in the United States, everywhere. And even if we were to have more resilience from a trade perspective, because as a country we're less trade dependent, if you started to see more weakness show up globally, that obviously filters through to the United States. So it's not a better than even bet at this point for recession, but I think we all need to be dusting off recession watch list to reflect this incredible amount of uncertainty. We're not seeing a huge impact yet on the hard data. We're seeing it obviously in the soft data.
Yep.
But at this point, unless we get a reprieve on tariffs, what's more likely to happen, unlike a couple of years ago, is the hard data is more likely to catch down to the soft data versus the other way around.
We've at the peak to trough, we did have a 10% pullback in the S&P 500. We've rallied a few percentage points here, including the futures market today. How was that market move with a little bit of hindsight here? Was that a reasonable response to this uncertainty that's been brought into the discussion?
Probably, but I think the fuller story gets told under the surface of the indexes. You're right. In the terms of the S&P 500, maximum drawdown has been 10% this year. But if you look at the average member level, the maximum drawdown has been 15%. If you go down to the NASDAQ and you look at average member maximum drawdown year to date, it's negative 33%. So there's been a lot of churn and weakness under the surface. We still have a large cap bias in terms of what has been leading from a broad style perspective this year. It's just been large cap value, not large cap growth. That still gives a lift to these cap weighted indexes in relative terms.
You and your team live on airplanes and out seeing the Schwab world. When somebody asks the question from the cheap seats, Lizanne Saunders, is the bull market over? Let me rephrase. Is the bull market broken?
No, but I think we are clearly in a correction phase. It wouldn't surprise me if we continue this with this trade uncertainty, and in particular if the tariffs do go into full effect on April 2nd, that we could have a cyclical bear market. I'm not sure I would yet be at the point of stating that if the bull market is over, that we're entering into some sort of secular bear market, but we're in a cyclical pullback here, notwithstanding some strength today. So I think that there is still risk related to the uncertainty regarding tariffs.
Lizanne Saunders, with just all the experience she has at Charles Schwab, told that she's with us for an extended conversation today. Good morning across America. Good noon in Europe. On the Pacific Rim, we say good evening to all of you. Just humbled by the success out on YouTube of Bloomberg Podcast. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Paul?
And some of the leading tech stocks that we've all grown accustomed to seeing moving higher and higher, whether it's Google or, Amazon or Microsoft. And, peak to trough, they're down 15 to 20% here. How do we think about the tech sector as potentially a leader for this market, which it's been for many, 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 many years? Can we still rely on that?
I think you'd have to see stability in forward estimates, whether it's the Magnificent Seven or it's the tech sector or maybe the growth trio that houses the Magnificent Seven, which would be tech, communication services, and consumer discretionary. We still have stronger earnings growth expected for, say, the Magnificent Seven cohort relative to the S&P 493, the other stocks within the S&P. The problem is direction. Directionally, we're moving up a little bit in terms of ex-Magnificent Seven. We're moving down, such by the end of the year, we're going to be not full convergence, but and this is based on consensus numbers. You've got Magnificent Seven looking at maybe 20% earnings growth versus mid-teens for the rest of the S&P 500. And that is in contrast to a year ago where the Magnificent Seven had about 55% earnings growth and the rest of the S&P was very low single digits. So it's the direction, it's the direction of travel that matters. And I think that's been one of the fundamental reasons why we've seen that group of stocks lag this year.
What's your confidence level, Lizanne, in terms of the rest of the market, that low to mid-teens kind of earnings growth? What's your confidence in that earnings number? Do analysts need to bring those down?
Not terribly high.
Okay.
Not terribly high. I think analysts are at the mercy of the guidance that they're getting from companies. Companies are dealing with the grave uncertainty, basically going into hold pattern from a CapEx perspective, from a forward guidance perspective. It's not quite like it was back in the COVID era, where you saw a record percentage of companies just withdraw guidance altogether. But it's such a murky environment. And what analysts have done is take that sort of collective wisdom from their companies, and their bias has been to pare back estimates. Right. So you've gone from, at the beginning of the year, about a 15% expected growth rate for 2025. And this is all the entire S&P 500. That's down now to around 10%, which, if that is accurate, that comes in at a lower growth rate than 2024. I think that's been at play in terms of this corrective phase.
Where the multiple valuation, like you say, stay with large cap, but are we under a 20 multiple in a blended Lizanne Saunders market?
Yeah, so you have to segment it. You're still in the mid to high 20s for tech or the Magnificent Seven. Then you get closer to 20. We've come down from about a 22 forward multiple to about 20. Then you can go equal weight or S&P X Mag 7, and you're into the teens there. So it really depends on how you segment things. The problem is that we've had a declining numerator and a declining denominator. As I mentioned, I think we need to see stability in the denominator part of the equation to provide a little bit of a lift from a valuation perspective. We're not quite there yet.
I can't emphasize, folks, the partial dynamics Lizanne Saunders just effortlessly described there. So take it further, Lizanne. I got a better valuation in Europe. Warren Buffett is buying in Japan because he's got a better valuation there. Can you, just as a general statement, a PE ratio, can you be a PE hog and underbuy going to a lower ratio that's not going to lift when we lift?
So I think the international comp is an important one, because clearly we have seen the rest of the world trade at a significant discount to what have been fairly lofty valuations in the U.S. And I think that's part of the reason for international outperformance. It's a reminder to investors that even if U.S. exceptionalism isn't dying here, that there are merits to diversification across asset classes, inclusive of international, and that's clearly paid dividends. But one of the things we always like to remind folks is when you're comparing a region to a region or a country to a country, U.S. versus any place else in the world, you have to understand the economic dynamics of the country or region. If you are a country, say, like Australia, that has a big mining component, the multiple afforded to that market in general is going to be lower than a more innovation-driven economy like in the United States. You know, my colleague Jeff Kleintop, who you guys know is our international strategist, talks about Germany is essentially an auto ETF. So I think there has to be that understanding of the economic dynamics, not just an apples to apples valuation comparison that needs to come into play.
Do you agree with my core theme? I think everybody knows I feel this way, that the great unspoken is corporations adapt and adjust. Can Standard & Poor's 500 corporations adapt and adjust to what they've been given in 2025?
Well, tell them what they've been given. So a colleague of mine was at the Business Roundtable in DC, and one of the themes coming from companies specific to tariffs was just tell us what they're going to be, and then we can adapt and adjust. But the back and forth, the shoot from the hip, the uncertainty in terms of timing, magnitude, duration is what's causing such a constraint right now. If we actually knew what the playing field looked like, I think companies absolutely could adapt and adjust. We're just not there yet.
So Lizanne, giving all that uncertainty as a backdrop, is there any argument for small and mid cap stocks here today, or no?
So I think there's some bottom fishing that is probably warranted, but I think more important, particularly important in the small cap space, is to stay up in quality. So focus on things like strength of balance sheet, the non-zombie companies, strong free cash flow, high interest coverage, profit margin stability. That's the way I think to move down into the small cap space. I wouldn't take an index approach to small caps, especially in an index like the Russell 2000, because we're still talking about at least 40% of the stocks in the Russell 2000 are some combination of zombie companies or not profitable. There are times where you get that leverage to a big turn up in the economy by going down the quality spectrum, and that tends to work in small caps. I think we're still far away from the point where we can start to build in an expectation of a huge pivot back higher in economic growth.
Right.
I think we have to wait for that for broader small cap outperformance. But I think that there are opportunities in the higher quality segments of the small cap indexes.
Just brilliant. We'll feature Lizanne Saunders in Single Best Idea today. Thank you so much, Lizanne Saunders at Charles Schwab. Really appreciate this morning. Futures up 66. Paul says it's because to a tariff light or tariff
light, maybe a little
tariff
bit,
delayed.
But as Lizanne says, we don't really know.
Wait 2 hours.
Exactly.
and we'll have to see. Looney, we never quote at 143.39 on Looney. Good morning in Mexico. Thank you so much for your attention. In Mexico City, 20.18 on dollar peso as well. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says Americans will rise up if President Trump defies court orders. Schumer spoke on NBC's Meet the Press in regard to a case that's had the president calling for a judge's impeachment. It's over a Venezuelan deportation flight that the judge ordered to turn around. Bloomberg's Laura Davison has more.
Democrats have talked about a constitutional crisis for years now. Now there's actually concrete evidence of basically Trump not respecting the balance of power here, and that the power of the judiciary. We even saw Chief Justice John Roberts come out and put out a statement in this, which really suggests that this was sort of a new line that was crossed in the past week.
Bloomberg's Laura Davison in Washington. In Israel, one victim was killed and another severely injured in what police are calling an act of terrorism carried out by an Arab Israeli citizen. He rammed his car into a bus stop filled with people, then stole an Israeli soldier's rifle, shooting and injuring that soldier while shooting and also shooting at other cars passing by. He was quickly killed by police. U.S. and Russian negotiators are meeting in Saudi Arabia today, working on a partial ceasefire in Ukraine. It's aimed at finding a framework to end the war there. U.S. officials spoke to the Ukrainian delegation yesterday. Ukraine's defense minister saying those talks were productive. Thousands of postal workers staged rallies across the country yesterday. They are protesting proposed Trump administration job cuts and a merger with the U.S. Postal Service with the Commerce Department. Mayor Brandon Johnson spoke at the Chicago rally.
From sea to shining sea, we are going to make sure that we protect all of our public accommodations, whether it's the mail, whether it's education, whether it's justice, whether it's environment. We are fighting for the working people of this country.
Any move to merge the Postal Service with the Commerce Department may not be possible without an act of Congress. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. All sorts of news in the airline business today. Let me just preface it. I had one trip at EWR where I couldn't sit down going out in the United Lounge, and I couldn't sit down coming back in the United Lounge. It's a failed experiment, period.
Just personally, I've done a gajillion miles of traveling over my career. I've never been a lounge person. I've just never domestically. Now, when I fly internationally, I'll definitely hit the lounges before hopping on a flight over to Europe or Asia or something. But it's just never been part of my thing. Now United is charging more to get access to the lounges, but I don't really know many people that use the lounges when they're flying domestically.
They're packed.
Yeah.
They're packed.
Are
The
they?
Delta
Yep.
was, I think Delta figured it out earliest that they're packed and it's a failed experiment. And now United comes back. Christine Chung at the New York Times, charge more, offer less. And I guess it's, it gets rich. Do you want to pony up $1,400 a year for an all access membership? I don't think so.
Yeah, it just doesn't have the value for me. But
I mean,
yeah,
There it
And now
is.
the airports, I mean, at least the ones I go to, they're all, mostly of them, they're new, they're renovated. They got all kinds of great food, just in the regular airport itself. I mean, you can't even get a McDonald's hamburger anymore, or any fast food in these airports anymore, because they've upgraded their restaurants and all their food. So it's changed, but I think it's, we'll see.
To me, frankly, fine fancy class, it's been a failed experiment. It's just, they're crazy. They're nuts.
But
busy,
in Europe,
stupid.
Europe, it's part of the culture in the airports. I think
and you pay for it.
Yeah, I think you probably pay for it. Yeah.
Here it's been like a free lunch, and it's been a failed mission. One of the senior executives actually talked to me and said it was the single biggest headache. He said
managing the lounges. Yep.
Just trying to figure it out, and the answer is, with this huge announcement from United Airlines today, you're simply going to pay more for it. We'll have much more on that. Stephen Trent scheduled to be with us with Citigroup, expert on the airlines. Futures up 63. Dow futures up 368. NASDAQ up 1.4%. The VIX right on 1900. Paul, gold.
Yep, higher.
It's higher. It's sort of like, I'm going to call it, there's stability to gold at these new higher levels.
Yeah, and if you talk to the Mike McGlones of the world, the commodity strategists, they kind of see it higher. Again, Goldman Sachs out, maybe a month or so ago, maybe a little bit more than a month, with a 3,100 call when it was around 2,800. So they're looking pretty good there as well. So we'll keep an eye on that. And Bitcoin, that is trending higher, up 2.8%, up to about 87,500.
DXY to 104 has great conversation. Barry Eichengreen in the FT this weekend from Berkeley with a must read. I'll talk more about that in a bit. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bloomberg Television and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Well, we've got NASDAQ futures leading the gains this morning. Traders snapping up those beaten down tech shares. There's also more optimism over tariffs. We'll start with NASDAQ futures up nearly 1.5%, 294 points. S&P futures up more than 1%, 66 points, and Dow futures up 0.9% or 382 points. The two-year yield 3.99%, up 4 basis points, and the yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up about 5 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed, and we have Bitcoin up nearly 3% at just over 87,000. More economic data out this week. We have the core PCE. That's on Friday. Today, though, it's the S&P Global Preliminary March Composite Index. That's for services and manufacturers. This morning, shares of building materials company James Hardie taking a hit, down 14% in Sydney. That's after it agreed to buy Chicago-based AZEK in an $8.75 billion cash and stock deal. AZEK, though, up about 18%. And finally, DNA testing company 23andMe filed for bankruptcy. Its co-founder and CEO stepping down, but will continue to serve on the board. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is Joe. Adam starts with us again. I got too many windows open today, Paul. I mean, it's killing me. Adam Farstrup with his head of multi-asset North America at Schroders, and he has the joy of working. Folks, the reality in charting is there's spider charts and scatter dot charts. Scatter dot charts are usually across 4 quadrants, and what's very important is you have to have a degree from a fancy British school to use them successfully. The IMF knows this. Everybody knows this. You have George Brown from the University of Hull, and he has the single best scatter dot chart of the madness we're living in right now. Discuss.
So we think it's really important to understand how we could be wrong. So we all come up with baseline forecasts, and our baseline forecast is for continued growth in the U.S. economy. But we need to ask ourselves the question as investors: how could we be wrong, and what might that look like? So that's what the scatter plot is trying to show you. What are the different scenarios that could impact growth and inflation in the global economy?
I love, Paul. They've got aggressive Trump is one dot, another dot, aggressive Trump, world ex-U.S.
World ex-U.S. Very good. So I would think the consensus, it's not the consensus, but a growing discussion is that this economy might have some fundamental headwinds here. And I'm hearing the R word, the recession word, maybe a little bit more in the last 4 or 5 weeks than I have.
Yep.
How do you guys think about this economy, which underpins earnings and then underpins the market? How do you think about the economy?
Absolutely. So the probabilities of recession have clearly risen, but we still think it's early to price this in a meaningful way. So we are staying long equities as a result. But you mentioned the aggressive Trump scenario, U.S. and world ex-U.S. One of the things I think is important to understand is as we go further out that policy agenda, if we get the aggressive tariffs, if we get the pain, as Scott Besson has talked about, before the benefits, then what you get in the U.S. is a stagflationary response, meaning growth falls, inflation goes up. But outside the U.S., in Europe, you could have a deflationary response where actually not only does growth fall, but inflation falls as a result.
So everyone listening or watching, good morning on YouTube, has a basic idea what you just described, Adam, is uncertainty.
Yeah.
How do you stay long given uncertainty?
So you look for what is mispriced in the market, and this scatter chart helps us think about that. And when we look at what's mispriced in the market, it is hard to know where should U.S. equities be priced today, particularly things like Mag 7. But we look outside the U.S., and we've talked about this before, we see some tremendous earnings power. And I think one of the big pieces of news has clearly been the change in Germany. I think this could be a potential sea change in terms of fiscal policy in Europe being much more expansionary than we've seen in decades. And so as a result, you look through that, you think European banks. December 14th of last year, when the Mag 7 peaked, who would have actually told you that European banks, cumulatively had outperformed for the past 3 years the Mag 7.
Interesting. Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, but the movement of capital perhaps rotating out of the U.S. market into Europe, is that a trade or is that a investment over a multi-year period?
There is an investment, but an investment takes time. So I think what you're seeing right now is a trade. Because we don't know the exact shape of the changes in Europe. We don't know the unintended consequences of this, but it is something we want to watch carefully. And from a bottom-up standpoint, as global stock pickers, you can find these opportunities.
Is the United Kingdom part of Europe? I can ask somebody from Schroders this and get away with it.
Yeah, well,
is the UK part of Europe? When
not
you say
according to the British.
European stocks?
Not according to the British. They're no longer part of Europe.
But in the investment world of Schroders, are they part of Europe? Like if I want to go long Germany, it's Lizanne Saunders just said it's an auto ETF, or I want to go long Finland. Is UK part of that discussion?
We think of the UK as separate from Europe. Actually, when we think about regions and
it's the certain clubs on St. James, that's the way they roll.
So what is your head of multi-asset? As we talk about equities, how about fixed income? Where do you see the opportunities in fixed income? Do you suggest...
Ask about Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. We'll get to Bitcoin later. But do we take credit risk out there, or are we just sticking with the treasury market here?
So we are taking credit risk, but we're rotating where we're taking that credit risk, because one of the places you're going to look for a sign that the economy is worse than it is for credit spreads to actually move wider.
Right.
And we've seen them move a little bit, right? Triple B spread has moved out a little bit, but by and large, it's been well behaved, which is why we think the economy is strong. But you look at things like local currency emerging market debt, which we would consider credit. These are markets that, by and large, except for Mexico and China, which is only about 20% of the index, aren't impacted as much by the tariffs. You have strong fiscal policies and monetary policies, rather, in those markets, and high real yields, meaning above inflation.
Audible. You're a multi-asset guy, as Paul mentioned. Are we over-diversified in our retirement accounts?
I don't think so. I think if you look at most retirement accounts, they're still very heavily invested in U.S. equities. Even the global indices, this is a really important point. Global indices are now almost 74% in U.S. equities. So if you've got a global allocation in there...
Whoa, say that again. My head's spinning.
So
and it's not my bracket. Go ahead.
If you look at MSCI World, which is an index of the entire world, right? Equity markets, it's 74% in U.S. equities.
I had no idea.
When I started in this industry, you'd go, global equities, wake me up in the middle of the night, I'd say 50% U.S. equities, right?
Yeah.
74.
Wow. And that's, do you see that broken?
I think it's going to have to reverse at some point. The U.S. economy is a tremendous dynamic place, and we haven't changed our view on that. But the amount of opportunities that exist outside the U.S., we think is phenomenal.
Adam Forster, thank you so much. With Schroders, really, really appreciate that. His note, we protect the copyright of all of our guests. Get from Schroders and Adam Farstrup that spectacular scattered out chart, which really shows us 6, 7, 8, 10 outcomes that are out there. Bloomberg Surveillance, all of our economics. It's brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. Paul, a firestorm, I say a firestorm of YouTube live chat over airline lounges.
I know.
I mean, what do you get there? You get a little bit of horse divorce.
Yep.
You know, you go through a line with 47 other people. Oh, you're laughing over there. Come on, Lisa, you're the first one. Everyone else is in the shrimp and you're having the hummus, right?
Yes. She's
I don't do the lounges, though. I got to be honest with you.
You don't do lounges.
I don't do lounges.
Do you know what I do at Heathrow? Don't tell Redo, keeper of the Amex. The lounges there are so bad that I go to Fortnum and Mason, which unfortunately is right next to the Hermes store. So often with Mrs. Keene, this is downside massive. But I just go to Fortnum and Mason, and I do it on my own account usually. But yeah, the lounges are just sort of scuzzy.
Well, I don't know.
$1,400 for a drink.
Well, I can make that I can make that math work. Don't worry about it.
But what's the appeal? People are just get the rewards points, and more people are going in. Like, is that why it's so overcrowded?
I'll cut them some slack. It was an experiment, and it was too successful. I mean, I walk by a Delta. I don't do the Delta thing, but the line across Delta, like at DFW or Dallas, it was like waiting to get into the Beacon Theater for Bruce.
I don't get to the airports that early. I mean, I figured it out that
Oh, you're that guy.
Well, I used to be back in the day before 9/11. We would have like a little game as we're leaving our client to head home on a Friday. Who could leave the clients the latest and still make the plane?
Have you ever done the Heathrow Dash Friday night?
I do the Friday afternoon.
I did it once. Never again. You dash out to Heathrow, and if you're lucky, you make it.
Heathrow
We're
Express.
lucky. Futures, green on the screen. We're on YouTube. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Matei. Well, futures advancing. This is on signs that the next round of President Trump's tariffs may not be as intense as previously expected. We go to NASDAQ futures, leading the charge right now, up 1.5%, 305 points. S&P futures up more than 1%, 68 points. Dow futures up 0.9%, or 406 points. The two-year yield, 3.99%, up 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 5 basis points. We have COMEX gold at $3,032 an ounce. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, little changed. Few companies making news this morning. Novo Nordisk has signed a $2 billion deal with Hong Kong-based United Laboratories International. It's for a next-generation obesity drug. Then we go to Bayer. It was ordered by a U.S. jury to pay about $2.1 billion to a plaintiff who claimed that its Roundup weed killer caused cancer. The company will appeal that. And finally, the co-founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, donating $50 million to his alma mater, Bowdoin College in Maine.
Nice.
Yeah, to create an initiative for artificial intelligence and humanity. $50 million. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that this morning. Talking about United Airlines and, the lounges and all that. Let's talk to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. How dare we do that? Out of Dartmouth and Tuck, Stephen Trent joins us from Citigroup, iconic, on the airlines this morning. Robert Crandall once told me that the revolution was persistent cash flow. Are the bigger United States airlines, are they finally delivering persistent cash flow?
Great question, and thank you for having me on. I would say post-pandemic, the network airlines are doing a very good job of that. United, Delta, American, Alaska, the four of them last year had several $1 billion worth of free cash flow.
Paul, I'm looking at, granted, the pandemic got in the middle of this. I've got them some stack. United's killing it. 10-year track record, 3.4% per year.
Yeah.
Shareholder return.
Talk to us, Stephen, about what we heard from the airlines, I guess, a couple of weeks ago in front of a investor conference. We saw the majors take their forward guidance down. Talk to us about what's driving that. What are they seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So you do have some issues in terms of where people are trying to get their heads around the economy. Are we going to have a slowdown or not? Are we going to get sort of coherent statements from Washington which give consumers and investors confidence or not? So some of the noise we're getting on that level may have indeed bled at least short-term into the booking curve. But I think beyond that as well, unfortunately you had 1Q is a tough quarter. You had several, unfortunately, high-profile aviation accidents. Several of them were fatal, sadly enough. And then where there's already a tough period for 1Q, we had California wildfires in January. So the confluence of those factors certainly weighed on what happened in short-term guides. Going forward in terms of getting to some calmer waters here, fundamentally speaking, we're constructive.
Where are the airlines in terms of capacity? And how quickly can they move capacity if the economy were to weaken?
Sure. So if one looks at domestic capacity per se, looking at the entire group, we may have kind of a flattish to slightly up picture. In terms of how quickly this stuff can get moved, we already went through sort of a mini review of this last July, when on a short-term basis there was a little too much capacity relative to demand. 3 months or so of that situation, and there was enough of a pull down that we got that nice inflection point in domestic unit revenue in September. So they can move fairly quickly. What's sort of hard to sort out at this time, is what will happen from the perspective of the economy. Do we get a slowdown, or is this just a hiccup?
Stephen Trent with us with Citigroup right now in the airline business. How do you respond to the question, they're really a bank with frequent flyer miles and all the marketing and the dumb lounges, that happens to fly an airline? How do you respond to the financial side of the business versus moving bodies?
Yeah, that's a great one. I would argue that the model has evolved. So if you look at the airlines 20 years ago, doing the credit crunch, for example. Delta Airlines was doing just over $1 billion of loyalty and co-branded card revenue, for example. Now they're doing several $billion a year. So I'm not saying that these businesses have suddenly become card companies or they're consumer companies, but that free cash flow contribution is now significant versus what it used to be. And that will play a role in valuation and earnings quality. So, we think that it's a good thing that they've moved in that direction.
United, American, Delta, the big three. Do investors differentiate between the three, and if so, on what basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think traditionally Delta's been the gold standard of the trio, the one that people look to management, look to the earnings stream, the strength of its co-branded card. I would say United has moved significantly in that direction. American Airlines was a little bit more of a high beta play. And we've seen some strategic changes from American over the last couple of years. I think the most recent one is really a good move in the right direction for American, re-engaging with managed business travel.
I want to get you in trouble with compliance. Where's JetBlue in 5 years? You got a neutral on JetBlue? Yeah, I believe. Where's JetBlue in 5 years? Help me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lisa's paying attention.
I would say that in terms of where that carrier moves, the unit revenue side of the fence and the route strategy is sort of one piece of the picture where it looks like they're moving in the correct direction. I would say the piece of the pie that looks a lot more challenging for them is the balance sheet.
Are you going to pay $1,400 for a lounge to get a free gin and tonic?
No, I won't. I won't do that.
Is the whole lounge thing done?
You actually had some post-pandemic chop in all of the lounge stuff when everybody started flying again, and you had a lot of people with frequent flyer status who were flooding lounges. So that's a great signal in terms of demand, but some of that has to be sorted a little better, and I think some of the airlines have already started to do that. So I think people still like the lounges.
I got 20 seconds. When you were at Dartmouth, did you fly into Lebanon? You feel like you landed on a Caribbean island.
Yes, my goodness. I did fly into Lebanon a couple of times.
Kim Pruitt was sitting on my lap. Stephen Trent, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. With Citigroup, just definitive here. Lots of green on the screen buys. He likes United and American Airlines, I believe you mentioned as well. Right now, too short a visit with our news, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. U.S. and Russian officials have been meeting today in Saudi Arabia, a day after talks between American and Ukrainian teams. Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson reports the discussions are getting down to technical details.
It's a little bit by bit. Obviously, Donald Trump will probably claim the win for every little development they get. But meantime, Ukraine and Russia are still attacking each other. We're seeing that going on. Russia is still firing missiles and drones into Ukraine and so on. The fighting is still going on. So whatever they're talking about so far has not really impacted what we're seeing on the ground.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is sounding a warning as President Trump continues to clash with federal judges on a number of fronts.
If Donald Trump should defy the courts, the public will rise up. Democrats will fight it in every single way.
Senator Schumer appeared on NBC's Meet the Press. The Trump administration continues to clash with a federal judge who ordered a deportation flight with alleged Venezuelan gang members to turn around. White House border czar Tom Homan says that case is still playing out in court.
This case is in litigation through the Alien Enemies Act, and we'll abide by the court order as litigated. But my quote was, despite what he thinks, we're going to keep targeting the worst of the worst, which we've been doing since day one, and deporting from the United States through the various laws on the books.
White House border czar Tom Homan was a guest on ABC's This Week, and you can hear Meet the Press and This Week every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance, our news update with Michael Barr. Brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to interactive brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interests at ibkr.com/RIA. Forget about the lounges. Paul, EWR. I love Terminal A.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And now
job.
they're working on Terminal B.
Yep. So they're doing good stuff there. So
good
kudos.
morning, EWR.
Yeah.
From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning. And now the
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Futures up 69 points, 1.2%. NASDAQ up 1.6% as well. Right now, let's take a look at some stocks. They're on the move today. We're joined by Bloomberg Surveillance's Lisa Mateo. Lisa.
Well, just when you thought your smartwatch couldn't get any more tech savvy, right? Or maybe any more confusing. Now you have Apple coming out and Bloomberg's Mark Gurman saying that they're moving into the AI wearables market. Sure. So basically they're adding these cameras and visual intelligence features to the smartwatch. So the idea is that you learn more about the world around you as you walk around. So for example, okay, so if you're walking around and you see, oh, look at this beautiful flower. I wonder what it is. You take your little smartwatch, right? And you hold down the camera button. You take a picture of something there, like that flower, and then ChatGPT or Google search will tell you exactly what it is. So it's there to kind of make your life a little bit easier. The only problem is that it only works with the iPhone 16. So you have to have that latest
I've
model.
upgraded. I don't know about everybody
you've
else.
Upgraded?
Sure.
I have not.
Oh,
so
please.
I do not.
I'm cutting edge.
But it could get a little bit of bigger boost because you have the release of iOS 18.4 next month. So
my basic feeling is we're not going to know what's going to win in AI. That doesn't sound like it's going to win.
it's tough. It kind of, you think about it like the glasses, right? That you wear, that you look and you see, and it can tell you different things about it.
Yeah, that's worked out.
Kind of like, the watch. You take a picture
baby
of it
steps.
and it'll tell
Baby
you.
steps.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
Next.
Okay. We have more news surrounding the overpriced cost of AI. You have Jack Ma-backed Ant Group. It's built AI models that cost 20% less using Chinese-made chips. It's produced similar results to those from NVIDIA. So this is the whole thing. The chips are coming from, sources are saying, domestic chips, including Alibaba Group, Huawei Technologies to train them. But NVIDIA is still in the picture. So NVIDIA is totally not out of the picture. It's still using AI for development, but it's now relying mostly on these alternatives like advanced micro devices and Chinese chips for the latest models. But it's just been this race we've been talking about and hearing about between Chinese and U.S. companies over the price. Remember DeepSeek? That really sparked things as to the
We all
cost
went
of
mental
AI.
for 3 days.
Yes.
Then what?
Very mental.
It's still out there.
But it's still.
I think what's interesting about this story is Jack Ma was starting to raise his profile a little bit. He has been underground for probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, he was put in his place.
He was put in his place by the Chinese government, but now we're starting to see him more, hear more. Alibaba stock is up 60%, 60% this year, up 87% over the trailing 12 months, trying to claw back some of that value that was just destroyed by the Chinese government back in the day.
You got one more?
Yes. Okay. Well, we're talking about Wall Street's one of their oldest data and analytics providers, done on Bradstreet. Private equity firm, Clear Lake Capital Group. It's agreed to acquire them. It's a deal that values the company at $4.1 billion. But it's actually the second time that Dun & Bradstreet has been taken private in several years. It's still not, a done deal. There's still a 30-day go shop period where they can, be open to other rival offers, because you had companies like Veritas Capital Fund Management. They've expressed interest in them. But Dun & Bradstreet had market value roughly $3.9 billion at close of trading on Friday. Not sure how much that compares to back in the day when,
What's their niche? Paul, do you have any idea on this?
It's financial data. It's financial data, and it is not a growth business for them. But what it is Tom, is a very steady cash flow business. So if you're private equity, you can lever it up and generate some equity returns
so they say.
Yeah, this is the second round of private ownership here again.
What I find an interesting tidbit is that 4 U.S. presidents actually worked for the company. I didn't know that. Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, Grover Cleveland, William McKinley.
Really? I didn't know that.
Worked for the company.
So that's a old company. It's been around a while.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Oh, so when we were kids, it was iconic, but most of those iconics have slipped away.
Or they've been acquired by bigger data companies. But here, this just shows you, I think, the value of data. And when you layer on the technology, whether it be AI or other technology, it makes that data even more valuable.
Okay.
So there you go.
Lisa, thank you so much. Lisa Mateo with a stock report this morning. Greatly appreciate that. A new feature for us, like seeing that. Futures up 68. The VIX under 19, 18.87. We need some Canadian music.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
The president wants lower interest rates from Chairman Powell.
You can make the argument that this is a really rich market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
President Trump signing a wide range of executive orders.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. He should have been Secretary of Treasury. I'm sorry, he was shortlisted.
Exactly.
Coming up, Joseph Lavorgna will be with us with SMBC Nikko Securities here on American economics and the debate forward of what we see as well. Part of that, and it folds right into where we are in the markets this morning, Paul. Up on, tariffs may not be all that onerous.
Yeah, that's some of the speculation. Again, it's a news-driven marketplace here, waiting for maybe April 2nd will be a key date for some of this marketplace to try to get a little bit sense of where this economy is going.
So wasn't there March
higher
14th?
Today. I don't know.
And there was April 2nd.
April 2nd is what everybody's telling me to focus on. Those are the reciprocal tariffs. Don't get confused with the other ones. These are the reciprocal ones. So we'll see how that plays out.
Dollar churning here this morning. Yields are higher. The 10-year real yield I haven't even discussed. 1.94%, really leg lower. It's come back a little bit, but I'm going to call it a correlated lift to the market this morning. Let's correlate over to our Bloomberg Business Flash from the Interactive Broker Studios. Lisa Mateo.
Let's do it. We've got futures advancing, hopes of more targeted U.S. tariffs. We'll start with NASDAQ futures, up 1.5%, 313 points. S&P futures up more than 1%, 68 points. Dow futures up 0.9%, 408 points. We have the 2-year yield, 3.99%. That's up 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 4 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. We have Bitcoin up about 2.5% at just over 87,000. Tesla leading the Mag 7 stocks before the bell. Its shares are up 4%. Meanwhile, Tesla competitor BYD, it topped $1 billion in sales last year, beating Tesla for the first time since 2018. Its shares up 3% in Hong Kong. Then we go to Hyundai. It's expected to announce a $20 billion U.S. investment at the White House today. That's alongside President Trump. It's according to CNBC. Its shares are up 3% in Hong Kong. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us right now with SMBC Nikko Securities, Joe Lavorgna. For years on Wall Street, always with a vibrant message. Let's get the administration work basic. You were in the first Trump administration. Are you affiliated with the second Trump administration?
No. I do know the Treasury Secretary. I think is doing a great job, and you made a joke. He was perfect. That wasn't on any list. But my boss was Larry Kudlow. So Larry created a role for me in National Economic Council. That was Trump 1.0. So now I'm in the private sector.
Larry Kudlow and I are on the same page. This goes back to Wayne Angel, that nominal GDP really matters. Top line current GDP. Has this administration, with the chaos, whether Republican or Democrat, have they dampened the animal spirit? Have they dampened Kudlow's nominal GDP?
No, Tom. And I would argue that I'm going to give a counter narrative. And maybe it's that the chaos and confusion, which is the conventional wisdom, for now is actually not a bug of the system, but rather is a design so as to keep trading partners offside. If it continues, obviously, the full year, that's a problem. But I would say that what worries me much more on the uncertainty side is, what are we doing with tax policy? Because if we look at the uncertainty index, what we see is concerns about taxes are sky high. So we need the Congress to figure out, are these tax cuts getting extended? Are they not? Are there additional tax cuts? How might we pay for them? And that, to me, is a bigger concern for the economy and what it means for CapEx, ultimately growth, and then nominal activity.
It seems like every company conference call I listen to, every guest we have in here, we have roughly 25 a day, don't cite tax policy.
We have how many guests?
They say the uncertainty, when you do 5 hours, you get a lot. The
25
uncertainty
guests
just
you have?
introduced into the system has simply been, we just don't know where the tariff policy is going to be. You tell us where the roadmap is. Companies will adjust. Tom likes to say that companies adjust. Investors will adjust. It just gives a little bit of a sense here. So we understand the chaos from a negotiating perspective. That's fine. That is a strategy. But boy, it seems like the market's really craving certainty around
it does.
Tariffs.
And I remember reading a book way back when by Michael Jensen, Harvard Business Review, and talked about the short-termism of U.S. corporate America. And Maybe there's a little bit of that now where people want certainty. They're not going to get it. But also, CEOs tend to be pretty opportunistic, and you're buying a free option. So if anything goes wrong, and by the way, the economy, we could debate about the economic outlook. You could just blame whatever is convenient. So there's probably part of that. If you look at the small business side that generates 40% of the jobs, their numbers look great. So I'm going to push back a little bit on that. Let's see how we go after April 2nd and what happens as we move toward June.
Are you modeling sub 2% real GDP? We weren't doing that pre-election, were we?
So here's the thing, Tom. I don't like the first quarter numbers. They're going to look soft because the expenditure
which
side...
Which has happened before. To cut some slack. That's not unusual.
But what's really bizarre is that if you look at like real income, at least through January, it's up almost 3%. So you have like the expenditure side from Atlanta Fed down about 2%. And you got this huge increase on the real income side because job growth is still positive. I'm not sure how to square the circle. Right now, yes, it does look like GDP will be on the lower side than the higher side. You're supposed to mark your numbers down for the year. But having done this for a while, we also know that you could drive a truck through the first and last estimates of GDP.
Fair. But, you know, given trickle-down economics, where's the Gini coefficient of the United States? I mean, is this an administration governing with a presumed tax cut for the haves against half of America flat on their back?
Yeah, so this is where I would say that where the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TICJA, which, by the way, President Trump wanted to call it the Cut Act. TICJA. So I like the former more. But anyway, but if you look at the data through the pandemic, and Kevin Hassett, our current head of NEC, Larry's old job, had done some nice work on this as well. But if you look at the income by quintile, the mid to lower ends in relative terms did extraordinarily well under Trump 1.0. And in terms of real median income was up about $6,000 in those first 3 years. And that was about 5 to 6 times what it had been in the prior 16 years with both Democrats and Republicans. So if the tax cuts, my opinion is the tax cuts are extended, you'll get that blue-collar boom that Larry, my old boss, talked about, and I'm optimistic we'll have good wage growth. But we'll see what happens. We need to get this done.
I mean, judging just from your sources, people you talk to, do you think that tax cut will be extended?
I do think it's extended. So one of the things I thought was interesting is when Speaker Johnson got that budget blueprint through, I thought that was a big deal because that told me we're going to get the CR. Right. So the fact we didn't shut the government, I think it was smart that Chuck Schumer kept the government open because that would have delayed things another several weeks. Depends is can we get a bill in place sometime maybe before June that it could be signed mid-year. That would make me more optimistic that we'll get good growth. If we're waiting, and I think, by the way, we'll get the tax bill done, but if it happens in December, I'm going to lower my GDP numbers.
Joe Lavorgna with us. Joseph Lavorgna, SMBC Nikko Securities, an extended conversation this morning. Good morning on your commute across the nation. Good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, 92.9 FM in Boston. Of course, good morning on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Just stunned at the results there. Good morning to all of you. Good evening, I should say, in the Pacific Rim. Paul?
Joe, from your perspective, what are the long-term gains that we may see in this economy for what may be some short-term pain? What are the long-term gains that you're looking for?
It's clear that we can't sustain 6% budget deficits to GDP ratios. And you know, fortunately, who's ever party in power always blames the other side for not being a fiscal hawk. But it seems like we certainly need to do something on the spending side. And what I've highlighted to clients is if you look over the years, the GAO has done some interesting work about how we do have a lot of waste, abuse, and fraud in the system. The Pentagon's paying $600 for a hammer. There are massive cost overruns for the F-35. By the way, any politician typically wants something done that can never be touched. It goes under procurement because we could always argue it's national defense. So that spending doesn't get touched. But GAO had said that anywhere from 100 to 300 billion we could get rid of per annum. Now, I've heard people think Elon Musk gave a higher number. I don't know if that could be the case, but at least the older stuff said, look, if it's 100 to 300 per year, over 10 years, it's 1 to 3 trillion. So that to me is meaningful. But we'll see. I'd like to, again, this comes back to the budget because I want things that are legislated, because if it's legislated, you can't undo it every 4 years.
Okay, but this administration has quieted the legislature, right? I mean,
say that again?
The legislature's out of play.
Well,
right now we got an executive branch and
why,
a judiciary chasing after them.
That's right, Tom. And that's why we kind of need to figure out, okay, we haven't really legislated a lot. We've done a lot of executive order. That's why I'm relying may not be the right word, but I'm assuming that there's going to be something codified in law in the House.
Okay, totally. Lavorgna driving the market higher now. Futures up 70. Joe Lavorgna, and this is totally unfair to you because you're not at 1600 Pennsylvania or those environs right now. You say we need a tax cut. Brilliant. Who listening or watching says we don't need a tax cut? The line is tariffs will pay for it. Good morning, Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
Explain this.
Okay. So I'm making the assumption there will be some minimal level of tariff.
Fair.
And,
okay.
And I don't know what the numbers are going to be. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more April 2nd. My gut is that it'll extend a little bit further than there. We'll get some clarity, but not everything we want. Again, I don't know what they're doing in terms of the tax cuts, the spending cuts, and I don't know what the tariffs will be. I mean, there's roughly $3 trillion of imports, so a 10% tariff, in theory, could raise $300 billion, at least in the early years. But I don't know what they're going to do with that. Is that going to? It's certainly not going to be legislated in all likelihood. But is there a tariff? What is it? How many spending cuts are actually implemented? And how does the economy perform?
Have you seen legit work on this from Yale Budget Lab or CBO or from
the
Dr.
CBO?
Hassett?
Well, let me say this. I don't like the CBO scoring because if you look at, they assume in the next, just to give you an idea, over a 10-year scoring period, the difference between, using their revenue numbers, a difference between a 3% economy and a 1.8% economy over a 10-year period is about $4.3 trillion of additional revenue. So this notion CBO is going along this current law versus baseline, to me, is a big problem. And you're going to get a huge tax hike next year if it's not extended. To assume then your revenue share of GDP is going to go up, I think, is totally misplaced. So there's a lot of things that are going on, but I think the scoring has been woefully inadequate. But again, Tom, until we see what's in these bills, I'm just speculating. I want to see actually what happens, then I'll make a judgment call at that point.
The most recent University of Michigan survey was disappointing to the marketplace in the sense that it reflected slower growth outlook and higher inflation outlook. How concerned are you about inflation moving higher, whether it's driven by tariffs or not? What is your inflation call?
So the inflation is long. What I am optimistic is you are seeing money supply, and it's hard to measure totally broad credit creation. A lot of credit now is outside the public markets or in the private credit markets. Yep. M2 growth has slowed. You are seeing wage growth moderate, although I'm not a big proponent that wages drive inflation. Gas prices are dropping in some parts of the country. The energy side, to me, is going to be very important. And if the administration is successful, and I think they will be, but they need, one of my assumptions, they need gasoline and oil prices down, because you could lose about a point on inflation, headline and core, if oil goes back to 60 or slightly below. So we need that. So that's how I see things shaping up.
What do you say to people who say tariffs are a tax on the consumer?
So what I would say is when you go through just the simple math of what President Trump had said last year, 10% across the board, 60% on China, you got like a 9/10 increase in the price level, assuming everything was passed through, which history suggests it's not. Some will be absorbed in the margin, some will be absorbed in the exchange rate. But I would say to people, look, if you're having to pay a one-off higher price for a good, but if you're a blue-collar worker, you have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, which, by the way, those are supply-side factors, and you're paying no tax on Social Security benefits, and we're also having the benefit of low marginal rates and low corporate rates. That, to me, is a great trade-off, because ultimately, in my opinion, it will drive long-term productivity growth through capital expenditure.
Thank you so much out on YouTube for this idea of what our government does, and I adored him. Admiral Zumwalt was one of my heroes a million years ago. So we spent $24 billion or whatever, $9 billion of research costs on the Zumwalt destroyer. We went from X amount down to 7. It cost so much, it was a failure. Now we're back to Arleigh Burke. I think Stavridis would say that's a good thing. Only 14% of the budget is controllable. What would be the proper response of the parties against President Trump? Do you see a cogent response to the Trump economics?
I'm not sure. Are you asking a question on the spending? I'm confused on the question.
It could be either. I'm confused on the moment as well. The confusion here is I don't see a cogent debate about our fiscal policy over into what it means for our family's investment policies as well. Where's this debate in 3 months or 6 months?
So let me just sidetrack for a minute. Let's just talk about Trumponomics. So what I see is, this isn't exactly what you asked, but at least we'll talk about the economic policy, is What I see is a desire and intent to re-engineer, reindustrialize the U.S. manufacturing base. And a tariff is a necessary but not sufficient criterion to try to do that.
Fair.
In addition to low corporate rates on domestic production, cheap and abundant energy, because it's very key to produce things. Germany is basically isn't cost efficient anymore. If you exclude the pandemic production, their industrial production is back to what it was in 2010. Right. And then, of course, you need business-friendly regulation. Permitting process, I think, needs to change a bit. Even I think the other side can agree on that. So that would kind of encourage capital to come into the U.S. On the fiscal side, Tom, which you raised, which is very interesting, we need to have that debate. But I don't think we've ever realized how much spending we just right. waste. And people talk about, oh, it's all entitlements, and that's where the money is, a 30% discretionary. But there is a lot of waste and abuse, even on some of these entitlement programs. But people, unfortunately, conflate getting rid of the abuse with, oh, people are losing their service, and that's not the case. But we don't have that debate, and we should.
We have a debate here that we haven't talked about, basic economics. Where does SMBC Nikko see the unemployment rate going, given all this?
We've got the rate essentially in the low fours, 4 to 4.25. So we think it'll stay pretty low.
It's going to stay there.
Yeah, well, it's 4.1 now, and I would say
that's an outlier call. I would suggest.
To tell you the truth, that doesn't surprise us. We tend not to look at other economists, in part because we don't want to be biased. But to get a higher rate, Tom, we'd have to be really pessimistic on growth. Also, too, Okun's law is useful, which is, you know what Okun's law is, but it's the relationship between potential GDP and what actually happens in the economy. And the other thing is this, is that even if we had a slow period of growth this year, maybe you talked earlier about the pain. Yes, we're going to have somewhat of a pullback on the fiscal side. Secretary Bessent mentioned detox. But if all of a sudden it looks like 2026 is going to accelerate, financial conditions will ease in anticipation of that. Hopefully there'll be some clarity on the tax side, and companies wouldn't lay people off. So there'd be no reason for the unemployment rate to rise if the 12-month forward was improving.
Joe, thank you so much. Huge response.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Lavorgna, Chief Economist, SMBC Nikko Securities, a swarm, formerly working with Mr. Kudlow with the Trump administration version 1. Futures up 67, Dow futures up 396. The VIX nicely under 19, 18.94. I'm going to call it a coordinated lift this morning. Even Bitcoin, 87,000, gets back from that 79,000 level. Gold up $11, $3,032 the ounce. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Negotiators from the United States and Russia are meeting in Saudi Arabia today to discuss issues that could lead to an agreement to stop the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials are concerned that comments by U.S. Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff signal the Americans are in line with Moscow on key issues, including whether 4 occupied territories in Ukraine belong to Russia. Ukrainian parliament member Alessandro Moresco.
We were extremely disappointed and shocked by the recent statements by President Trump envoy Mr. Witkoff, because he is parroting Putin's propaganda, and we are very concerned about this.
Meanwhile, at least 7 people were killed when Russia launched a barrage of drones across Ukraine overnight. London's Heathrow Airport is defending its handling of an unprecedented shutdown after a power substation fire knocked out Europe's busiest airport for nearly a full day on Friday. Benedict Kamel is head of global aviation coverage at Bloomberg News.
The National Grid CEO came out and said maybe the full closure and the length of the closure, the full day on Friday, could have been avoided. There was enough power at other substations that could have been pulled in. Heathrow came back this morning with a statement saying, look, this is a complex operation. We use about as much power as a small city. You can't just sort of quickly turn a switch. Moving from one substation to the next would have been very complicated. You have to reboot the entire system.
Bloomberg's Benedict Kamel reports for now, UK leaders and Heathrow's airline partners are waiting for more information before they pass judgment. Canada's new prime minister is calling for a snap election April 28th. Mark Carney says he needs to know the nation is behind him as he deals with President Trump's trade war and builds an economy benefiting all. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Thank you for the comments on YouTube, fiery comments, both pro and con, Paul, there with Joe Lavorgna.
Yeah, very reasonable voice.
It is a huge debate. And I go back to the dual mandate of the Fed, which is the job dynamics. I don't think still is talked enough about. Torsten Slok with an email this morning. Did you see that?
I did see that. I mean, he's just calling out the whole immigration decline and what that means for the labor force. And, people have called that out, saying that's going to be a challenge for this economy.
His modeled number, good morning, David Kelly at JP Morgan, who's out front on this, 60,000 is the run rate of non-farm payrolls with a new lower immigration. I've never framed that in my mind.
No.
That's a new number.
No.
Can you imagine a 60,000 3-month in a row non-farm payrolls?
Where did the illegal immigrants go? And I've seen this research.
Oh, they stopped them.
Agricultural and construction.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you.
It started at the late Biden administration, and with a vengeance now, we see just a whole change at our borders on immigration. Futures up 68 from New York City on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. This is Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this features report sponsored by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing, wealth management, capital markets, investment banking. Well, this morning we have NASDAQ futures leading the gains. This is as traders snapping up those beaten down tech stocks. There's also more optimism about tariffs on top of that. So we start with NASDAQ futures up 1.5%, 305 points. We go to S&P futures up 1%, 66 points. Dow futures futures up 0.9%, 396 points. The 2-year yield 3.99%, up 4 basis points, and the yield on the 10-year 4.29%, up 4 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. We have Bitcoin up above 2.5% at just over 87,000. More economic data out this week. We have core PCE on Friday, but today it's S&P Global's U.S. rate on manufacturing and services PMI. Stocks on the move. The building materials company James Hardie taking a hit, down 14% in Sydney. That's after it agreed to buy Chicago-based ASEC. It's an $8.75 billion cash and stock deal. ASEC, though, up about 20%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. When I looked at brackets and said, who has a bracket worse than mine? Kelly Cox, front and center.
Carolina, that was
that was painful. You were right on that. You're killing it, Paul. Yeah, joining us now, redoing our bracket, Kelly Cox joins us with Ritholtz with an incredibly smart note this morning. Again, we protect the copyright of our troops. Get our guest, her note from Ritholtz Management. Yeah. I love this. Remember your agency in market turmoil. This isn't about your agent, Callie, is it?
It's not about my agent. I wish I had an agent. And let me tell you, the note today was about how the economy is not busted, unlike my bracket, because I had UNC going to the Sweet 16. But that's exactly it. I think in times like these where there's a lot of noise and little signal, it's important to focus on the signal, but it's also important to remind our clients who are long-term investors that there's a lot they can do outside of feeling nervous and anxious and, getting caught up in the headlines.
So I know you guys at Ritholtz Wealth Management really do stress long-term view to investing here. As these markets gyrate here in the early parts of 2025, do you tend to add to sectors that you like, positions you like? Do you tend to maybe focus on quality? How do you kind of day to day, have these discussions with your clients?
We prioritize stability and consistency. That's the shortest way of saying how we, are approaching these markets. And we try to build portfolios that are all weather. So we're not necessarily, adding significantly or cutting significantly in these times. But, what we're doing is trying to talk to clients about how, we prepare for these unexpected scenarios. I think at this moment, if I had to point out something that I'd change, and of course I sit on a committee, so it's not just me. But, if there's something that has perked my interest right now, it's the fact that, we're seeing bonds react well in this environment to the market stress, but we're seeing the curve react a little bit differently than it has in past sell-offs. That's
a really important nuance, folks. Paul and I noticed that coming in this morning with yields up, say, 4 basis points here with this move up, futures up 67. Kelly, an important point here, and it goes back to the unemployment rate where the Fed's modeling 4.4% out there somewhere. We've got other people modeling a higher unemployment. Joe Lavorgna, constructive on Trump economics, just modeled a low unemployment rate. Correlate the Ritholtz market move with the unemployment rate.
Well, the unemployment rate is one of the most important metrics to watch if you're an investor, because it's really hard to have a recession unless the consumer stops spending. And when Americans are making money, they're spending money. I'm worried about where the job market could go from here. We've seen layoffs across the government. We've seen less hiring support because now government's out of the equation. American companies are under a lot of stress. But the unemployment rate is still quite low, and we haven't seen those layoffs come to the forefront. I don't think we've seen the worst here, but so far, when we're looking at hard data, it still looks like the unemployment situation is okay. So where we're heading could be a problem. Where we are is fine. Right. So, I think it's time to prepare again, lean on that agency, and remember that stability and consistency are your sanity hedge in environments like this.
We're going to stay with Kelly Cox, Ritholtz Management here as we get the market open. Paul, the live chat's on YouTube. Sometimes, I don't know if this is a compliment or not. I like these guys, even if they are New York liberals. This is an informative broadcast.
Exactly.
Tommy, thank you for that. Really appreciate those constructive comments. We'll have to see.
To someone who voted for Reagan back in the day.
Yeah, we will point out that the heritage of Matthew Winkler and what John Micklethwaite does as our editor-in-chief is we really try to be balanced, and where, we're trying, day to day to stay out of the fray and not give you a political angle. Sometimes I fail at that. She never fails with the market opening. Lisa Mateo.
And let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500 up 1%, 60 points at 5,729. We go to the Dow up 0.8%, 348 points, 42,331. And finally over to the Nasdaq up nearly 1.5%, 261 points at 18,046. So a lift to the markets as we start the new trading week. We go to the 2-year yield, 3.98%, up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%, and that's up 4 basis points. Want to point out COMEX gold, $3,029 an ounce. We go to oil, Brent crude, $72 a barrel. As far as the Bloomberg dollar spot index, that's little changed, and Bitcoin up more than 2.5% at just over 87,000. Leading the Mag 7 this morning, well, that would be Tesla, up more than 3%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. She wouldn't come on, she says, unless we flog Barry's book. I don't know what that's about, but let's go there right now. Barry Ritholtz out with a wonderful new book. And folks, I'm not going to go into it now, but there's a type 2 construct, which means the word not is important. What Mr. Ritholtz says is how not to invest. Kelly Cox, let's say you're right in the second version of this successful tome. The movie rights have been sold. When you say how not to invest, Kelly Cox, what is your number one rule?
Well, I just want to echo everything you said. And let me tell you, I'm honored if I'm writing the second version of this book and there are movie rights on it. I have no doubt that there's potential there. But when I'm talking about how not to invest, I would go back to your why and, letting your why go, understanding, how long you're investing, for what you're building wealth for, and how you get to that goal. Everything goes back to your why. So if you flip that on its head, abandoning your why, getting caught up in the headlines. And that's a lot harder than it sounds.
I mean, I'd see Reese Witherspoon, doing the Kaylee
sure.
thing.
I can see that.
Maybe too old for it. Emotional decision-making is what Barry calls it.
Yep. Callie, what role does fixed income play in portfolios these days? What's the conversation you have with your clients about that?
I alluded to this about a minute ago, but right now we're talking about the stability factors with fixed income. Of course, you can look at fixed income as a source of yield or for capital protection. And we think it's in the sweet spot between both of those benefits. That doesn't mean it's easy, right? We are, looking a little further down the curve right now and hugging quality because we are, trying to prepare for a slowdown in the economy here. But, we're seeing a lot of policy tied up in the longer end of the curve as well. And that's why you see the 10-year at 4.3 when there are clear worries about the economy. So, we don't get into that much detail with clients, but right now we're trying to assure them that we built a portfolio that does help protect you against unexpected scenarios, and fixed income is part of that.
Kelly Cox, thank you so much. On short notice today with a brilliant Monday note. Really appreciate that. She says, we didn't even talk about it, the Fed's tricky spot. Getting out to the May 7 meeting. Let's get the calendar out right now, Paul. We got 1 week left in March.
Yeah.
Monday is March 31, a week from today.
There we go.
And then we go out to JP Morgan. I believe it's April 11 is my memories.
Yep.
I could be wrong on that. And then we go stupid into the end of April and early May. But you got April 2nd, tariffs, which are a complete mystery. Right now, the market open 3 minutes. Dow up 363 points. I guess they like the news. Stay tuned for Paul and Alex. Maybe the headlines will change by
We'll
then.
see. We'll stay on top of it.
We'll have to see.
So and we've got the the bond market reacting a little bit here, Tom. We've got
constructive, as Kaylee said.
Yep, the yield's a little bit higher here. The 10-year Treasury's at 4.29, calling out the yield curve steepness. The 2 years at 3.99, the 10-year at 4.29. Just to give you a sense there.
Yeah.
WTI crude oil, it's $68.
Sure.
I filled up for $2.79 a gallon this weekend, which was extraordinarily and
But nevertheless,
disinflationary.
it's emotional.
Yeah.
As Kelly, I believe, mentioned, or maybe it was Joe Lavorgna, it's emotional.
Bought a new car for my son who spends most of his time in California, so we had to get one of those hybrids because the cost of gasoline out in California is like $6 a gallon or something crazy. So we bought my first hybrid. I don't even know how it works. I think if you push the brake, it charges the thing. I don't know. But that's what he did.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Dow advances on Paul Sweeney's consumption in America, up 417 points. We continue on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, stocks kicking off the week with gains. Traders snapping up those beaten down tech shares. Right now, we'll start with the NASDAQ, up more than 1.5%, 302 points. We go to the S&P 500, up more than 1%, 74 points. The Dow up 0.9%, 413 points. The two-year yield, 3.99%, up 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%. That's up 4 basis points. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. And COMEX gold, $3,027 an ounce. Tesla leading the gains in mega caps right now with shares up about more than 5.5%. Meanwhile, Tesla competitor BYD topped $1 billion in sales last year, beating Tesla for the first time since 2018. Its shares up 3% in Hong Kong. And battered chip makers, well, they're rallying despite the news that Jack Ma-backed Ant Group used Chinese-made semiconductors to train AI models that would cut costs by 20%. For example, NVIDIA up nearly 2.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Lisa Mateo. Derek Lang has a textbook out called Labor Economics, Introduction to Classic and New Labor Economics. It's in my hallway at home. And what I can tell you about labor economics textbooks is you go into class and you go, oh, yeah, this is going to be great. I don't have to study, Paul, it's going to be great. And a couple tests, and I'll get a quality B. And about 4 chapters in, you're like, okay, do I drop out or enjoy this C-? It's one of the hardest things to understand. He got an A in labor economics. Michael McKee joins us in support of his conversation with Mr. Bostic in Atlanta this morning. Michael, if immigration plummets and Torsten Slack models a new non-farm payrolls of 60,000, how does that change the calculus of the unemployment rate?
It probably changes it, Tom, more in a political sense than in an economic sense, because with the labor market, with the labor force falling, if we lose a lot of people out of it, then the number of people that you have to hire each month, as the so-called replacement level for people coming into the labor force to take up the slack of those who left and leave unemployment unchanged, is going to be somewhere between 60 and 100,000, according to the latest Fed estimates. So from a Fed point of view, from an economics point of view, it probably wouldn't be seen as a terrible situation. But politically, it would be seen as a problem because it would suggest the economy is slowing down. And of course, it would be hard to explain that 60,000 is good when you've been adding 200,000 on a fairly regular basis.
Can you see McKee's question? He'll be in the front row at the May 7 meeting. Excuse me, Chairman Powell, it's 67,000 non-farm payrolls. Which Grateful Dead song are you listening to? I can see it now.
Would that type of scenario in the labor market, Michael, would that be materially inflationary if I don't have those if those low-wage workers are not coming in, and maybe I got to fill those roles with higher wage workers?
Well, that's economic theory, and it's one thing that people are worried about, and the Fed is going to keep an eye on. If you don't have the low-wage workers in, you're going to have two problems. One is maybe a shortage of goods, particularly in the agricultural sector, and that would lead to more imports, which would lead to higher prices. And also, if companies are trying to hire and can't find workers, then obviously that tends to drive up their cost.
Are we there yet, where companies can't find workers, or is there a plethora of unemployed out there?
No, we're there yet. I mean, the JOLTS data show that the number of people who are in the labor force has risen somewhat in recent months. It's just a question of matching at this point. Obviously, the low-income workers who might be deported aren't going to be the computer programmers that some kind of companies need, that sort of thing. And, of course, there's a lot of specialized occupations that depend on migrant labor, like the beef processing and that sort of thing. So there may be some shortages, but it's not yet because there's been a big crackdown.
I love to ask Mike McKee this question. Mike, what does Raphael Bostic not want to tell you today?
I don't think it's so much a question of what he doesn't want to tell us as what he knows enough about to talk about today. The Fed is in the dark as much as we are in terms of exactly how these tariffs will affect the country and the economy. And it is very complicated to think about the through process here. So I would imagine that he would have to admit that the Fed at this point is somewhat clueless and will have to make it up as it goes along. They can model a lot of different things, and a lot of Fed officials and investment banks have done that. The question is which of those models will actually prove to be accurate, if any, since this is such a weird topic.
Michael McKee, an important conversation today with the president of the Atlanta Fed, Raphael Bostic. Thank you so much. Just brilliant as always. Dow up 456 points. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. U.S. and Russian officials have been meeting today in Saudi Arabia, a day after talks between American and Ukrainian teams. Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson reports the discussions are getting down to technical details.
It's about perhaps moving from getting away from targeting energy, but also to some kind of understanding about maritime traffic again in the Black Sea. So it's bit by bit, and they haven't really tackled the hard stuff. The really hard stuff is what to do exactly where the fighting is on the ground inside Ukraine.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson says Ukrainian officials expect even more talks with the U.S. team today. More courtroom action today in the legal battle over deporting hundreds of migrants from Venezuela. President Trump escalated the feud with federal Judge James Boasberg, calling Boasberg a constitutional disaster on social media. Boasberg has set a hearing for today to, quote, get to the bottom of whether the administration ignored his order to turn around flights bound for El Salvador carrying Venezuelan immigrants. Canada's new prime minister is calling for a snap election April 28th. At a news conference, Mark Carney saying he needs a strong mandate from the nation as he deals with President Trump's trade war and his threats to Canadian sovereignty.
President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen.
Parliament is being dissolved. This year was always going to be an election year, but it would usually have been occurring in October. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Out of Edmonton, Alberta, Harvard hockey, 1986-87. Sophomore and senior year goaltender, 5'9". One listing is 190 pounds, and then he lost 30 pounds, it says, over to his senior year. It was Ozempic, 160 pounds. Mark Carney, goalie for Harvard.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah. And say good morning to 99 FM in Boston. A few other accomplishments. We should say that Mr. Carney had a relationship with Bloomberg here, no longer.
Right.
As he's a little occupied as Prime Minister of Canada towards this election. We're efforting team coverage.
Sure.
I said, just, fine. I just, if I can avoid the black flies, great.
Yeah.
There he is, Edmonton, Alberta.
All right.
Weighed 160 pounds. That's back when goalies were normal, like Gump Worsley.
Well, now they're just...
Roger Crozier. Yeah. Ed Jacquemin was Carney's size. And now these guys are 6'5", with tons of equipment on. You can't get the puck by him.
No. Has the goal size changed? No.
No. I talked to... some NHL people about it. I mean, I'm bored. I mean, the game's with Ovechkin, the game's radically changed because you can't get the puck by the goalie because they're not Mark Carney at 160 pounds, 5'9".
Those hockey fans are passionate, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Right, so there we are. Good morning, Harvard. Good morning, 92.9 FM in Boston. Paul, we got to do a data check. Seriously, absolutely. When did we last see a screen like this?
S&P 500, Tom, up 81 points, 1.44%. The Dow, I'll quote it for John Farrow, up 490 points. It's 1.2%.
About 42,000.
Yep, that's a good call. Yep, absolutely. NASDAQ up 300 points above 18,000. That's 1.75%. So some solid 1% to 2% moves here in these equity markets. Year to date, we're starting today down around 4.5% on the S&P 500. We're down peak to trough, maybe 7.5%. Getting some of that back here. And apparently, if you're looking for catalysts here, just perhaps a sense that these tariffs that we do get, the reciprocal tariffs come April 2nd, may be a little bit less than maybe
particularly to autos.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's hearsay. We want to be very careful.
Exactly right.
We don't have reporting on this per se. I would point out in the yield space, yields are higher. Sweeney out looking at 6,000 square feet this week and trying to get it in before rates surge up again. From New York City on YouTube, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. Dow up 500 points. It's the only time Isabel Lee will walk in. She'll only come in when the Dow's up 500 points. VIX here moving 18.67 right now. A nice correlated lift to the market, something we haven't seen in a while. You have a home run essay today out, and a guy at Federated Hermes who has big tech-like returns, but he wasn't in big tech. Do I have that right?
He's very underweight big tech, but he has some because he said you have to have a little bit because he calls it risk management. Can you believe it? That to own big tech now, it's risk management. I think we had a report from SPIVA, is that how you say it? SPIVA, S&P's arm, when they release reports, and active managers really always underperform.
So what is his model here? What is his strategy?
So he's a quant fund, but what makes him different is his decision tree analysis. So this is kind of like a learning algorithm. It's part of machine learning, but it dissects historic data to predict future stock performance. And each branch represents a factor like momentum, economic moat. And the thing with decision tree analysis is there's always a yes and a no. And then within that one branch, there's a yes and a no. So then you have the rationale of why you pick the stocks as opposed to just a black box algorithm that spits out something.
Is he doing securities analysis, or with a double degree at Harvard in computer science, it's just completely black box and he walks in the morning and presses the button and it says buy, sell?
They choose what to feed it. They do security analysis, and he almost never touches it, or there's no discretionary review unless there's like wrong data inputted and stuff. But he's been doing this for a long time, and all of his mutual funds have this aspect.
Been beating the market, but has been underweight tech. I didn't even think that was mathematically possible.
I know. He still doesn't own Tesla, last I checked. So that's really one thing that a lot of active managers actually have been sitting out on. But all the rest, you have to own. I mean, I say have to because that's the consensus that I've been getting, because what else will you own and what will make you beat this index? So, but he has around 175 securities in this mutual fund. So it's kind of sector neutral.
He says 175. I mean, the vogue is towards so much non-diversification. Right. That's fascinating.
So how much money does he have in his fund here?
In this one, it's just around 1.6, but he has 8 other mutual funds.
Oh, listen to her. She's such a reporter. 1.6 what, Isabel?
Billion. If it's million, I think my editor might be a little
so
hesitant.
How's he doing this year? Again, the markets, we've had a sell-off this year. How is his fund done this year?
He's down 1.4% year to date, but that's a lot less than the broader market. And in the past 5 years, annually, he returned around 26%, and he beat 98% of his peers. So this is his all-cap fund. He has a large-cap growth fund. He has a mid-cap growth fund. He has everything. He also has ETFs. And it's interesting. My editor was like, why have we never heard of it? I think a lot of quant managers just fly under the radar.
Okay, folks, all you got to know is this. Isabel's going to come back with more great Sharpe ratio. 97th percentile 1 year, 99th percentile 3 years, 97th percentile 5 years. Just killing it. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Is he a nice guy? Does he have good Red Sox tickets?
That I don't know, but he was nice when we talked to him.
Okay.
Very unassuming and just humble.
Yeah. Right. Okay, good. Isabel Lee, thank you so much. Don't be a stranger. Just great vignettes here into what the buy side's doing out there. Look, he's got an R squared of 0.947, and he's underweight at tech. How do you do that?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this, some of Isabel's reporting here. This decision tree model 20 years ago had 6 factors. Now there are 16. So it's getting
like
more and more
Saunders.
complex.
We go full circle to what Lizanne said.
Yep. So getting more and more complex.
And
Tom, your VIX, we're down here solidly below 19 now, 18.55 on your VIX.
I don't know what to do with it. World's coming to an end. Boom, up we go.
Up we go.
It's going to be an interesting morning. Paul Sweeney, Alex Steele with you through the morning. And, of course, on the politics, balance of power will drop by as well. Where are we? We're up 509. NASDAQ up 1.9%. What kind of morning is it? It's a good morning for Def Leppard.